Tonight, we're exploring the darkest secrets of every mega evolution and the heavy price of that power. This is a fascinating topic, but I'll keep my narration calm to ensure you can still drift off to sleep. Thank you to those of you who've been joining us consistently. If you're falling asleep with us tonight, let me know in the comments how many nights in a row you've been here. And if this is your first night, just comment night 1. Now back to the video. Close your eyes and imagine the heat of a battlefield in the Kalos region. The air is thick with anticipation. You reach for the key stone set into your ring or your bracelet, and your partner Pokémon looks back at you with a gaze of absolute trust. A flash of rainbow light erupts, the ground trembles, and in an instant, your friend has transformed into something transcendent, something beyond the limits of nature. For years, we were told this was the ultimate expression of the bond between a human and a Pokémon. We were told that this radiant evolution was a gift, a manifestation of pure friendship and synchronized hearts. But as the years passed, and our journey took us from the towers of Lumio City to the tropical shores of Alola, a different story began to emerge from the shadows of the Pokédex. A story not of harmony, but of horror. What if that flash of light isn't a glow of joy, but a scream of biological distress? What if the power we've been commanding is actually a violent, agonizing overclocking of a living creature's body and soul? When we look closer at the lore, we find descriptions of skin melting away under the heat of internal fires, of backs splitting open because the skeleton can no longer contain the surging energy, and of minds being completely erased by a predatory bloodlust that leaves no room for the memory of a trainer's love. We are forced to ask ourselves a very uncomfortable question. Is Mega Evolution a miracle, or is it a tragedy? The stakes of this mystery go far beyond simple battle mechanics. They reach back 3,000 years into a history of war and ultimate weapons. They touch upon the very essence of life and death, represented by the legendary forces of Xerneas and Yveltal. When we trigger a Mega Evolution, are we tapping into the natural vitality of the world? Or are we repeating the sins of an ancient king who sacrificed thousands of lives just to bring one friend back? The deeper we go into the history of these stones, the more it seems that every stat boost comes with a hidden tax, and every new ability is paid for in pain. Tonight, we are going to peel back the layers of this prestigious transformation. We will look at the specific physical and psychological toll taken on every species capable of this change. We will investigate the chilling accounts of Mega Gengar's malice, the physical torment of Mega Houndoom, and the heartbreaking loss of control experienced by Mega Salamence. We will explore how a mechanic that was once a symbol of hope became one of the most disturbing chapters in Pokémon history. As the world outside grows quiet and the lights dim, we will journey into the heart of this dark secret. We will examine the evidence hidden in the archives of the Alolan researchers and the ancient legends of the Kalos War. We will confront the possibility that the greatest power a trainer can wield is also the greatest burden a Pokémon can bear. The mystery of Mega Evolution is a journey through a landscape of beauty and terror. It is a story of how the pursuit of strength can lead to the loss of self. It is a reminder that in the world of Pokémon, just as in our own, nothing is ever truly free. There is always a price for power. So let the world fade away. Let the sounds of the night settle around you. We are going deep into the lore, into the pain, and into the truth behind the stones. We are looking for the soul of the Pokémon beneath the armor and the rage. This is the dark side of the bond we thought we understood. This is the price of the Megastone. In the autumn of 2013, Pokémon X and Y arrived, and with them came something the most ambitious battle mechanic the franchise had ever attempted: Mega Evolution. It was presented not just as a power-up, but as the ultimate expression of trust between a trainer and their partner, a bond so deep, so synchronized, that it could temporarily push a Pokémon beyond its natural limits. The campaign was beautiful. The trailers showed Lucario, Charizard, and Mewtwo transforming in bursts of light, their designs sharpened and exaggerated, their power visibly surging. It felt like the culmination of every journey you had ever taken, every battle you had ever won, and it was exclusive to Kalos, a region that itself seemed designed to hold this secret in the highest regard. The Kalos region was a land of elegance, history, and ancient stone. Its architecture, its sweeping routes, its castles, and its carefully manicured gardens all whispered of a long, deep legacy. And at the heart of that legacy, both literally and culturally, stood the Tower of Mastery, a towering stone structure rising above the coastal town of Kalos City. It was not merely a building, it was a shrine to the pinnacle of trainer skill. To stand atop the tower was to be recognized as one worthy of the ultimate gift, a mega ring. This ring, a band with a keystone set into its center, was the only way to activate Mega Evolution. It was a mark of prestige. You could not buy it, you could not trade for it, you could only prove yourself worthy by facing the successor of the legendary Gherkin, the man who guarded the tower. The act of receiving a Mega Ring was ceremonial. You were led up the spiraling stone stairs, the wind howling outside the narrow windows, until you reached the open chamber at the very top. There, under the clear sky, you and your partner were tested, not for strength alone, but for harmony. The Mega Evolution that followed was supposed to be the very symbol of that harmony, a physical manifestation of a bond that could not be broken. And for the player, it certainly felt that way. Your Pokémon stats skyrocketed. Their appearance became something out of a dream. You had unlocked a new level of combat, a tactical advantage that could turn the tide, could turn any battle with a single activation. The prestige of the Mega Ring was not just in the victory it brought, but in the proof that you and your Pokémon were truly one. But even in those early days, there were whispers of power. There was a strange silence. The marketing never dwelled on what exactly happened inside the Pokémon during that transformation. The bond was the explanation, but what did the bond actually do? How did a simple stone and a ring cause a creature to rewrite its own biology for the duration of a fight? The answer was not in the first game's dialogue or the manual. It was buried deeper in the Pokédex entries of later generations, in the quiet horror that would eventually surface. The initial framing, the Golden Age of Kalos, masked something far more unsettling. The prestige, the ceremony, the beauty of the transformation, they were all true. But they were also the surface of a much darker ocean. You see, the key to understanding Mega Evolution's true nature lies in the contradiction between its promise and its reality. In Kalos, you were taught that Mega Evolution was a gift, a privilege earned through trust. The Tower of Mastery stood as a monument to that ideal. But even as you slipped that ring onto your finger, and your finger felt the cool metal settle into place, the question lingered in the background of the story. What if the bond was not the cause, but the excuse? What if the power was not a reward, but a pact? The transition from tactical advantage to lore-heavy mystery began almost as soon as the games launched. Fans started noticing that the stones themselves had no clear origin. They appeared naturally in certain parts of Kalos, buried in caves, hidden in rock formations. They were not created by machines or spells. They simply were. And then came the whispers of the Kalos War, the ultimate weapon, built by a king named AZ over 3,000 years ago, powered by the life force of countless Pokémon and the stones. Some began to theorize that Mega Stones were not natural at all, but fragments of that ancient tragedy, remnants of a time when energy and evolution were twisted for war. The Tower of Mastery, it turned out, might have been built not just to celebrate bonds, but to control a power that had once been used to destroy. The Golden Age of Kalos, for all its beauty, was built on a foundation of secrets, and those secrets would eventually crack open, revealing a biological reality that the initial marketing had quietly omitted. But before we can dive into the darker side, into the pain and the rage and the loss of control, we must first understand the mechanism itself. How does a keystone and a megastone actually communicate? What happens in the body of the Pokémon when the sync is made? That is the next step in our journey. Delicate and terrifying machinery behind the transformation. In the next chapter, we will explore the mechanics of synchronization, the silent conversation between stone and soul, and what it truly means to push a creature past its natural boundaries. The Tower of Mastery stood as a monument to what Mega Evolution was meant to represent, a perfect union, a dance of trust and shared will. The trainers who ascended its steps did so not only to learn a technique, but to receive a symbol, a keystone set into a ring or a bracelet that would pulse with light at the exact moment their partner's megastone responded. It was a ceremony of synchronization, a public declaration of a bond so strong that reality itself would bend to accommodate it. But what does synchronization actually mean? The games present it as a simple resonance. The Keystone and the Megastone call to each other across a short distance, and the transformation occurs. But the language of Pokémon lore, when you look at the deeper descriptions, suggests something far more intricate. The two stones are not just communicators, they are amplifiers. They take the energy of the trainer's intent and the Pokémon's life force and multiply them, forcing a temporary restructuring of the Pokémon's cellular matrix. And that restructuring requires a biological condition we rarely pause to question: synchronization. It is not merely a bond, it is a precise alignment of two nervous systems. The Pokémon have their own unique patterns of bioelectrical pulses, their own internal rhythms that govern everything from heartbeat to instinct. For Mega Evolution to succeed, those rhythms must temporarily merge with the trainer's own neural patterns. The Keystone acts as a bridge, reading the trainer's emotional state and projecting it into the Megastone as a frequency the Pokémon can receive. But here is where the subtle horror begins to creep in. A Pokémon's nervous system was never designed to be overridden by an external source. Even the strongest bonds rely on natural trust, not forced alignment. When the Megastone activates, it does not ask permission. It pulls the Pokémon's energy reserves into a state of hyperdrive, flooding its sensory pathways with so much signal that the creature's own consciousness can become overwhelmed. Early analyses from the Kalos region scientist hinted at this. Some Pokémon exhibited tremors, dilated pupils, even signs of shock immediately after demorphing. But those signs were dismissed as battle fatigue. The transformation itself is not a natural evolutionary step. Mega Evolution is not a form the Pokémon would ever reach through time, environment, or effort. It is a state that must be externally induced, a temporary violation of the body's own limits. In nature, evolution is a slow adaptive process. Mega Evolution is an instantaneous overclock. And overclocking any biological system generates heat, stress, and microscopic damage. The Pokédex entries that later described melting claws, blown open backs, and uncontrollable rage were not exaggerations. They were the price of asking a living creature to become something it was never meant to be. This is where the trainer's role becomes crucial. And not only for activation, the trainer sentiment. The synchronization demands a grounding force. When a Pokémon's nervous system is overwhelmed by the surge of mega energy, it begins to lose its own reference points. Its instincts roar to the surface, pain blurs thought, and the creature can attack anything that moves. The trainer's mind, broadcast through the Keystone, acts as a stabilizer, a calm signal that says, "You are still yourself, I am here, hold on." Without that anchor, the Pokémon would become a berserk reactor of raw power, dangerous to allies and enemies alike. And yet, even with the anchor, the transformation leaves a mark. Every Mega Evolution is a momentary collapse of the boundary between self and other, between natural and forced. The synergy is beautiful, yes, but it is also a fragile arrangement balanced on the edge of catastrophe. For every successful Mega Evolution, there's a silent trial where bodies and minds are pushed to their breaking points. And as the years passed, those silent trials began to speak. The Golden Age of Kalos presented Mega Evolution as a gift. But the mechanics were always whispering another story, the resonance, one that hinted at cracks beneath the surface, waiting to spread. What those cracks revealed would change everything we thought we knew about the bond between trainer and Pokémon. The previous chapter explored synchronization, began to reveal something deeper as we examined the bond tying trainer to Pokémon, the mysterious resonance that allowed a Mega Stone to unlock a form beyond final evolution. But even as the Kalos region celebrated this power as the pinnacle of trust, certain details lingered at the edges of that hopeful narrative. Details that suggested the connection might not be purely harmonious. In the official artwork, the animated models, the sprites that flickered across the screen during battle, there were visual cues that hinted at something beneath the surface. Take the sprite of Mega Houndoom, its body wreathed in flames so intense that were rendered almost too bright, the edges of its claws and tail appearing to drip, to melt in the heat. The original design description emphasized the extreme temperature, but if you look closely at the official model from Pokémon X and Y, the texture on its body carries a slight distortion, as though the flesh itself is under strain from the energy coursing through it. This was not accidental. The artist deliberately conveyed that the transformation was not merely a strengthening, but a burning, internal combustion that pushed the Pokémon's physical limits. Then there is Mega Tyranitar. Its sprite in the game shows a massive armoured form, but its back appears cracked, opened, as if the armour has been forced apart from within by an overwhelming surge of power. The game's own Pokédex entry in Pokémon X described its body becoming so hot that it melts the ground beneath its feet. Yet the visual cue is one of structural failure. A shell that cannot contain what is inside. And even in the earliest days of Mega Evolution, before the later games would codify the horror, the designers were planting seeds. The small details in the way Mega Gengar's sprite shows its body warping into a more jagged, almost skeletal shape, its eyes turning to empty hollows. The transformation was not just an upgrade, it was a distortion. The first cracks in the facade appeared not in the text, but in the silent language of the sprites themselves. When Mega Evolution first debuted in the anime, the tone was similarly layered. The episode introducing Mega Evolution, aired in 2013, depicted the process as intense, at first a clash of wills. The very first Mega Evolution seen on screen was a wild, rampaging Pokémon, uncontrolled. The bond was not yet strong. The trainer had to learn to synchronize, to overcome the volatility. The transformation was shown as something that could easily spiral into a state of pure instinct, where the Pokémon lost its rational mind and acted only on aggression. This volatile nature was core to the early teaching of how to achieve it. The narrative framed it as a danger to be mastered, not a gift to be given freely. Even the earliest Pokédex entries hinted at the overwhelming nature of this new power. In Pokémon X, Mega Charizard's entry states that the force of the transformation causes it to lose its sense of self, becoming consumed by the need to burn everything around it. Mega Mewtwo's entry in Y warns that its mind becomes filled with nothing but the desire to destroy. These were not isolated cases. The shift in tone began to crystallize as the franchise moved from the sun-soaked elegance of Kalos to the tropical warmth of Alola. In Kalos, Mega Evolution had been presented as an honor, a legacy of the ancient kingdom. But by the time Pokémon Sun and Moon arrived, the same mechanic was described through entries that spoke of pain, of bodies pushed beyond their safe limits. The games themselves did not retcon the earlier entries, but the new descriptions added a layer of unease. The Alolan Pokédex was written with a more ecological, observational voice, and it observed plainly that Mega Evolution could be damaging. Not just a test of trust, but a source of suffering. The cracks that had been hidden in small visual details, in brief text, now widened into chasms. The very same Mega Stones that trainers treasured were now described as artifacts that could destabilize, arouse instability in a Pokémon's biology, triggering reactions that bordered on self-injury. It was as if we were only now allowed to see the truth that had always been there, subtly drawn in the original sprites, hinted at in the early entries. This is where the story begins to turn. The cracks are no longer just visual clues, they become documented reality. As we prepare to leave Kalos behind and set foot on the islands of Alola, a different kind of teaching awaits. A revelation that redefines everything we thought we knew about that bond. The next chapter is called the Alolan Revelation, and it will show us exactly what happens when the facade falls away completely. The cracks we saw in the facade of Mega Evolution were subtle at first. A flicker of something wrong in the shimmer of a sprite, a pause in the anime where a bond trembled. But then the games moved on, in the year 2016, to the tropical islands of Alola, and with that was where the fissure became a chasm. Pokémon Sun and Moon did something that no main series game had done before. They looked at Mega Evolution, not through the lens of Colossian pride, not as a gift from an ancient king, but as a biological and ethical question. And the answer they found was deeply unsettling. In Alola, you see, Mega Evolution was not native, the ultimate technique. It was a foreign phenomenon, imported from a distant region. The locals had their own method of empowering their partners. The Z moves, a celebration of pure energy channeled through dance and ritual. Zeb moves felt organic, like a shared breath between trainer and Pokémon, a moment of synchronized will that left both exhausted but proud. Mega Evolution, by contrast, felt surgical. It was a forced transformation, a modification of the body's own evolutionary code. The Alolan researchers, the ones who studied the phenomenon with fresh eyes, began to publish observations that made Kalos uncomfortable. They noted that Mega Evolution increased a Pokemon's stats by an average of over 100 points. Yes, but they also noted something else. The energy required to sustain that state was immense, and it came from somewhere inside the Pokemon itself. This is where the Pokédex entries of Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon, released the following year, inserted a needle of cold dread into the warm narrative of partnership. For the first time, the games openly described the physical suffering of these forms. Take Mega Houndoom. The Pokédex in Ultra Moon says that the tips of its tail and claws are constantly melting due to its own intense body heat. It does not say it is unharmed. It says, essentially, that the creature is burning from the inside out, and that this transformation is what accelerates that fire. This is not a cool, controlled eruption. This is self-immolation, or Mega Tyranitar. The entry in Ultra Sun tells us that its body is overflowing with power, that its back is ruptured and torn open to release that energy. The description is clinical, but the image is horrifying. A creature whose own frame cannot contain the strength it has been given. The wounds are permanent, or at least recurring, every time the Mega Stone triggers. And then there is Mega Gengar. This one is infamous. The Ultra Moon Pokédex states plainly that Mega Gengar becomes so malicious that it will attempt to attack anyone nearby, including its own trainer. The bond, that sacred synchronization that Kalos praised, is severed. The Pokemon's consciousness is overridden by a raw, destructive will. The trainer's presence is not felt as a partner. It is a target. These entries were not anomalies. They formed a pattern. Mega Scizor's pincers become so overtaxed that they appear to scorch and warp. Mega Salamence becomes even more savage, its flight driven by a predatory instinct uncontrollable. Mega Gyarados, always a creature of fury, loses whatever higher reasoning it had left, becoming a mindless engine of rage. The theme was consistent. Mega Evolution was not an upgrade, it was a price. The Alolan researchers framed this in stark contrast to their own Z-moves. A Z-move does not change a Pokemon's form. It does not strain the body into a new shape. It is a burst of pure energy, a union of trainer and Pokemon that lasts only seconds, then dissipating like a held breath. There is no lingering change, no permanent damage, no risk of the bond breaking. In Alola, Z-moves were seen as the natural path, a temporary empowerment that honoured the Pokemon's natural state. Mega Evolution, they argued, was a forced mutation, a reversion to something wild and dangerous, and this created a philosophical divide. In Kalos, the culture celebrated Mega Evolution as the pinnacle of trainer achievement. The Tower of Mastery taught it as a legacy. But in Alola, the same mechanism was viewed with suspicion, even pity. Why would you make your partner suffer for a few minutes of amplified power? Why risk that loss of control? The Alolan perspective was not just a different region's opinion, it was a quiet indictment. The truth was that both regions were right, in a sense. Mega Evolution did come from a history of tragedy. The Kalos War, the ultimate weapon, the energy that had reshaped life and death 3,000 years ago. That energy was not clean. It was the residue of a cataclysm, and every Mega Stone was a fragment of that ancient fallout. The power was beautiful, but its source was a wound in the world. So when the games of Alola unveiled these dark Pokédex entries, they were not rewriting lore. They were revealing what had always been there, hidden beneath the prestige of Kalos, waiting for someone to look close enough to see the pain. The Alolan Revelation changed the way we understand Mega Evolution forever. It was no longer just a mechanic. It was a story about consent, about limits, and the risk of power without balance. And it set the stage for the next creature we must examine, whose burden is not just heat or rage, but the crushing weight of its own hardened shell, and the silent agony of a body remade into steel. Alolan Revelation pulled back the curtain on what was always simmering beneath the surface of the bond. Those later generation Pokédex entries, the ones from Sun and Moon, didn't just hint at a darker truth. They narrated a slow-motion catastrophe, a biological event unfolding inside the transformation itself. And if you want to understand the exact physics of that catastrophe, the precise mechanical failure of a body pushed beyond its breaking point, there is no better case study than Mega Scizor. Scizor, in its base form, is a creature of absolute precision. It is the result of a slow, deliberate evolution. A partnership between a bug and a steel coating that was never meant to grow this thick. Its pincers are not just weapons. They are finely tuned surgical instruments, capable of crushing and cutting with terrifying accuracy. Every movement is calculated efficiency. It is a living blade, maintained and respected for its deadly grace. But when the keystone resonates with the Scizorite, that grace is traded for pure, overwhelming force. The energy does not politely upgrade this creature. It floods the system like an electrical current, far too high for the existing wiring. The carapace, once a defensive shell, now feels brittle from the inside, taut, ready to splinter under the pressure of its own musculature. This is where the deep dive into the physical toll becomes unavoidable. The heat generated by this massive energy overflow is immense. The official Pokédex entries from the Alolan region are not using metaphor. When they say the heat of Mega Evolution causes its pincers to melt, they mean it literally. The very steel that makes it formidable begins to droop. The claws that once snipped with perfect accuracy are now glowing a dull red, softening, the tips beginning to run like hot wax. The body of Mega Scizor becomes a weaponized machine, a fact that sounds empowering until you realize the machine is running without a safety valve. Every shell plate is a potential stress fracture. Every muscle fiber is torn and reknit under extreme force. The tools of its hunting instinct are being dismantled by the power required to wield them. It is a blade that dulls as you swing it, a gun barrel that warps with every shot. The integrity of the form, the very structure that grants it this power, is the first thing to fail. And this reveals the tragic reality of a Pokémon that cannot sustain its own upgraded form for long. Scizor, a being that values control and surgical perfection, is forced into a state of explosive decay. It can feel its own body reaching the threshold of collapse. The heat is not a warm aura. It is an internal furnace threatening to breach its shell. The world shrinks to the tip of its melting claws, and it does not feel the power as strength. It feels it as pressure, as heat, as a clock ticking down to zero. Mega Evolution for Scizor is not a safe harbor of power. It is a sprint toward collapse. It buys a few minutes of overwhelming dominance at the complete expense of its own molecular stability. The steel cools and hardens again when the transformation ends. But the fragility of that moment, the feeling of one's own body softening under the skin, must leave a scar deeper than any physical wound. Scizor bears the burden of steel, a metal that promises strength, but inevitably betrays the living flesh inside. It is a story of a form that burns too brightly for its own frame. This theme of self-destructive fire, of the flesh paying the ultimate price for power, extends to another form we must face. The flames that erupt from Mega Houndoom are not a mere battle effect. The Pokédex describes the heat as a constant, ceaseless burn that defines its very existence. We will have to look closely at the truth of Mega Houndoom's eternal burn, and the terrifying question of what happens when a Pokémon is not just risking structural collapse under the burden of steel, but is actively, unendingly consumed by the very element of its power. From the burden of steel, we turn to the burden of flame. Mega Scizor's pincers glowed red from the sheer stress of its own transformation, a heat born of friction and mechanical pressure. But that heat was a symptom, a byproduct of a body pushed to its absolute limit. There is a vast and terrible gulf between that external strain and what awaits in the shadows of Mega Houndoom. Here the heat is not a byproduct. The heat is the entire purpose. It is the core of the curse. Look closely at Mega Houndoom's form. The tail, which once ended in a sharp, bony point, now droops and drips like molten wax. The claws on its hands and feet seem to sag, the very structure of the bone softened and reshaped by an unseen inferno. This is not a growth. This is a melting. The Pokédex entries from the Alolan region coldly state that its entire body burns internally. The transformation forces its core temperature to a point where its own keratin and bone begin to liquefy. It is a creature enduring a constant, low-level combustion. The energy it burns is not just magical fire. It is its own substance, its own matter, slowly and agonizingly being consumed just to keep the flame alight. This is the first and most obvious sign of internal combustion. The body of Mega Houndoom is a furnace that cannot be shut off. The walls of the furnace are the hound itself. This brings us to the most unbearable aspect of its existence. The flames it breathes are not simply hot. They are a distilled form of its own suffering. The Pokédex describes the burns it inflicts as a curse. The pain never stops, ever. This transforms the very nature of its fire. Normal fire consumes. This fire imprints. To be burned by Mega Houndoom is to have a piece of its eternal agony seared directly into your nervous system. The flame itself is a scream. The pain is a physical language spoken between the ember and the wound. Every blast of fire the Houndoom releases is a fragment of its own screaming soul, sent out into the world to spread the pain it can never escape. It weaponizes its own suffering, making every enemy a living monument to its torment. The breath is an exhalation of curse, a release of pressure, a shared burden of a terrible, beautiful, horrifying power. The Houndoom species is defined by its pack mentality. Base Houndoom is a cunning hunter, coordinating attacks, respecting the hierarchy of its pack or its master. It is intelligent, dark, and calculating. Mega Evolution shatters this entirely. The constant, overwhelming, self-destructive pain overrides the rational mind. The cunning hunter becomes a feral engine of destruction. It can no longer coordinate with its pack, because its pack cannot survive the heat. In the wild, these mega-evolved Houndoom are tragically solitary, not by choice, but because their presence burns their allies. The loyal dark-type hound is demoted by the transformation to a creature solely consumed by agony, existing. The fire that burns within Mega Houndoom is a curse that never stops, a flame that consumes from the inside out. But for all that agony, Houndoom retains some sense of self. It can still be called back, still recognize the voice of its trainer through the pain. That is not the case for every Mega Evolution. Some forms break something fundamental in the creature, something that cannot be mended until the energy fades. And among all the documented cases of transformation gone wrong, none are as physically catastrophic as the tragedy of Mega Tyranitar. Tyranitar is already a monster. In its base form, it is a walking natural disaster, a creature whose very footsteps cause tremors and whose rage can level mountains. But Mega Evolution does not enhance that power in a controlled way. It does not refine the beast. It detonates it. The Pokédex entries from Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon describe the transformation with a kind of clinical horror. When Tyranitar Mega evolves, the energy coursing through its body becomes so immense that it literally bursts through its own back. The rock-like armor that covers its spine is not reshaped or shifted. It is exploded outward, creating jagged, crystalline spires that erupt from the flesh like shrapnel from a wound. This is not a gradual metamorphosis. It is a violent rupture, a sudden and extreme pressure release that tears through the creature's own body. And the damage does not stop at the surface. The trauma is neurological. The influx of energy overwhelms the nervous system, flooding the brain with so much raw power that the individual consciousness is drowned out. The Tyranitar that stands after Mega Evolution is no longer the same being. It cannot process commands, cannot recognize its trainer's voice, cannot even feel the bond that once tied them together. All that remains is instinct, and instinct in a Tyranitar is pure unthinking destruction. Imagine standing before a creature you have raised from a larvitar, creature you have fed and trained and fought beside for years. You activate the keystone, expecting to unlock a deeper partnership. Instead, the Pokemon's back explodes open. Its eyes glaze over. It turns toward you, but there is no recognition in its gaze. It does not hear your call. It only hears the roaring of its own amplified power. This is the loss of instinctual behavior in favor of mindless, destructive rampaging. Tyranitar is already a Pokémon famous for its territorial violence. In its normal state, it still has a sense of purpose, a pattern to its aggression. It will level mountains to build its nest. It will chase down challengers. But Mega Tyranitar does not stop. It does not discriminate. It will destroy everything within reach, including the trainer who commanded it. Without a flicker of hesitation, the bond is not broken. It is erased. And the tragedy does not end when the battle is over. When Mega Evolution fades, the body must recover from the trauma, but some wounds do not heal. The Pokédex entries hint that the physical scars remain. The back may never fully close. The crystalline protrusions may leave permanent rents in the hide, a constant reminder of the power that once tore through. The creature that returns to normal is not the same as it was. It bears the marks of its transformation, both physical and psychological. Some trainers report that Mega Tyranitar becomes more aggressive, even in boar form, after repeated Mega Evolutions. The price is paid in flesh and memory. This is the reality of Mega Evolution that the game's XY presentation never showed. This is the hidden cost, the dark secret that the Alolan Pokédex later revealed, and it is not an isolated case. The same pattern repeats, with variations in other Mega forms. In Scizor, the pincers melt down. In Houndoom, the flames become self-immolating. But in Tyranitar, the metaphor becomes literal. The body ruptures from within. The creature is no longer able to hear its own trainer. The instinct overrides everything, and the scars remain. What does that say about the bond that is supposed to enable this transformation? If the bond is what allows the energy to flow, and yet the energy destroys the recipient's ability to recognize the bond, then the entire premise is a contradiction. It is a partnership that ends the moment it begins. The trainer holds a key stone, but the Pokémon no longer remembers what that stone even represents. This is the shadow that falls over every mention of Mega Evolution. And as we move deeper into the catalogue of these afflicted forms, we will encounter one that does not just ignore its trainer. It turns on them with a malevolence that seems to predate the bond itself. The next chapter will confront a ghost that severs the connection entirely, leaving only hunger and hatred behind. That is the story of Mega Gengar and the severed bond. The previous chapter left us with the image of Mega Tyranitar, its back literally split open by the force of its own power, a creature so overwhelmed that it could no longer hear its trainer's voice above the roar of its own transformation. That severance of communication, of command, was disturbing enough. But there is another Mega form that takes this broken bond and pushes it into something far more sinister. Something that suggests not just a loss of hearing, but a complete collapse of the bond that holds trainer and Pokémon together. There is a form where the original creature, the one you raised and cared for, may not even be present anymore. That form belongs to Gengar. Gengar, even its base Gengar, is already a being of shadows and mischief. It hides in the darkness, follows you home, and feeds on your life force just enough to leave you chilled. It is not evil in the way a villain is evil. It is more like a trick of the light, a playful predator that does not fully understand the weight of its actions. But when you push that nature through the fiery lens of Mega Evolution, something breaks. The Pokédex entries from Alola do not mince words. They tell us that Mega Gengar becomes something far more dangerous. Something that does not just lurk in shadows, but actively seeks to drag everything around it into the abyss. The terrifying implication is that Mega Gengar loses all empathy for its trainer. That bond, that trust you spent years building, is overwritten, the very thing that allows Mega Evolution to happen. Yet once the transformation is complete, the creature that emerges may no longer recognize you. It does not see a part. It sees another source of warmth, another beating heart to drain. And in that state, it doesn't feel loyalty, it only feels hunger. This is not a simple case of aggression or misdirected rage, as we saw with Tyranitar. This is a fundamental redefinition of what the Pokémon even is. Lore suggests that Mega Gengar sinks into another dimension, leaving only its malice behind. Think about that for a moment. The physical form that stands before you, the Mega Evolved Gengar with its spiky, grinning silhouette and its single red eye is not the full creature. Part of it has vanished into an alternate space, a shadow realm that we can only guess at. What remains here in our world is a kind of echo, a concentrated residue of pure ill intent, the instinct to hunt, to drain, to terrify. That is all that came back from that other dimension. The soul, the personality, the memories, they may have been left behind on the other side. This makes Mega Gengar an extraordinary danger to bystanders. Its predatory nature is amplified to a supernatural degree. In its base form, Gengar might toy with its victim, scare them, maybe drain a little energy for a laugh. But Mega Gengar is relentless. It does not play. It sees all life around it as fuel. And because its empathy has been severed, it will not hesitate to turn on its own trainer, if that is what the hunger demands. The Pokédex entries specifically warn that it is said to be the only one that can see into the other world, which means that while it is here, it can perceive things we cannot. It may be hunting ghosts or shadows, but it does not distinguish between a real threat and an innocent friend. This is why Mega Gengar is considered one of the most ethically questionable transformations in the entire Mega Evolution roster. When you activate that keystone, you are not simply empowering your partner, you are opening a door to another dimension and letting something through that is beyond your control. You are trusting that the malice that returns will be satisfied with the battle at hand and not spread further. But there is no guarantee. Some fans have speculated that Gengar's smile, that permanent grin, is not a sign of joy but a mask, a way to hide that inside there is nothing left but cold calculation. It is one of the few mega forms that makes you wonder if the Pokémon is still in there at all. The same law that gave us Tyranitar's exploding back and Houndoom's melting claws gives us Gengar's disappearance into the void. It is a consistent theme. Mega Evolution pushes the creature beyond its natural limits, sometimes beyond the limits of its own identity. For Gengar, that means becoming a phantom that exists half in our world and half in a place no one else can see. It is a terrifying thought, but also a fascinating one, because if the bond is truly severed, then what happens when the battle ends and the transformation fades? Does the lost soul return, or does it take time to crawl back from that other dimension? Leaving the trainer, wonder if they have done something irreversible. The next time you see a Mega Gengar in battle, remember that the shadow you are facing may not be smiling because it enjoys the fight. It may be smiling because it has already moved beyond the concept of loyalty, beyond the safety of the bond, and into a predatory state that sees the entire world as prey. And that shadow, that remnant of malice, is what remains when the rest of Gengar has sunk into a dimension we can only imagine. It is a price that seems far too high for a few moments of increased speed and power. The blade of this transformation cuts deep, and sometimes the blood it draws is not from an opponent, but from the very heart of the partnership itself. And speaking of blades, of crescents drawn in blood, there is another megaform that takes this theme of predatory instinct and twists it into something even more visceral, a form that suggests the battle frenzy is not just mental but physical, a transformation that turns the creature into a living weapon designed to carve through anything in its path. That is the story of Mega Salamence, the blood-soaked Crescent. We left off with Mega Gengar, a creature that severs the very bond that makes Mega Evolution possible. Its form sinks into another dimension, leaving behind only its malice, a ghost that no longer recognizes its trainer. That is the price of power for a being that feeds on shadows. Tonight, we meet a Pokémon whose transformation is not about losing empathy, but about losing a dream that was once the very reason it evolved. Salamence's story begins with yearning. This is a Pokémon that was born without wings. Its body was grounded, heavy and slow, and yet from its earliest days as a Bagon, it harbored an impossible ambition: to fly. You see, Bagon's skull is incredibly hard, and the Pokédex tells us it constantly leaps from high cliffs, trying to catch the sky. It does this over and over, despite the falls, despite the pain, because inside that small, stubborn creature is a heart that aches for the wind. When it evolves into Shelgon, its body becomes a cocoon of armor, waiting, and then, when it finally becomes Salamence, it gains the wings it always wanted. 2 powerful crimson membranes that lift it into the air. Its dream is realized. But here is where the story twists. Salamence's flight is not graceful. It is described as wild, reckless, and fueled by sheer joy. It flies because it finally can, and for a while, that is enough. But when Salamence Mega evolves, that joy is transformed into something far darker. When the Mega Stone is activated, the energy does not simply empower Salamence, it reshapes it. The most striking change is its wings. Instead of 2 separate membranes, they fuse together into a single, crescent-shaped blade that arcs above its head. This is no longer a pair of wings for flight. This is a weapon, a scythe made of living tissue, honed by ancient energy. The Pokédex refers to this form as the blood-soaked Crescent, and the name is not poetic, it is literal. You see, Mega Salamence no longer flies for the sake of flying, it flies to hunt. Its aggression becomes uncontrollable. The very air around it seems to tear as it moves, and that blade-like wing is not just for show. Salamence will use it to carve through anything that crosses its path. The Pokédex entries are chilling. In Ultrasun, it says that Mega Salamence becomes completely enraged and will attack anything that moves. In Ultramoon, the entry goes further. It says that this Pokemon's bloodlust is so intense that it will even attack its own trainer if provoked. The bond that is supposed to anchor Mega Evolution is drowned out by pure primal fury. But there is another layer to this tragedy. Salamence's body was never designed for this kind of flight. Those wings, now fused into a blade, are also a burden. The force required to move at such speeds, at such sharp angles, puts immense strain on its skeleton and muscles. You can almost hear it in the way it moves in battle. It is not flying. It is warping the laws of aerodynamics. The strain is visible in its new form. The crest on its head grows sharper. Its claws become more pronounced. Everything about it is overclocked, pushed beyond its natural limits. And yet it does not slow down. It cannot. The rage drives it forward, and with every dive, every slash, every burst of speed, its own body suffers. But it does not feel the damage, not until the battle ends. And what of its original dream? That innocent wish to touch the sky, to feel the wind beneath its wings. In Mega Salamence, that dream is gone, replaced by a nightmare of conflict. It does not fly to explore, it flies to destroy. The crescent wing is a reminder of what it lost. It no longer soars, it strikes. This is the price of Mega Evolution for Salamence. It gains power, yes, but it loses the very thing that made it who it was. The joy of flight is traded for the thrill of the hunt, and when the Mega Stone goes dormant, what remains? A Salamence that might remember the bloodlust, the strain, the violence. It is a transformation that scars more than just the body. And yet, there is another Mega Evolution that pushes the breaking point even further. One where the mind itself is consumed by a single driving emotion, where the Pokémon becomes a beast of pure rage, and even the most loving trainer can only stand back and watch. That story is waiting for you in the next chapter. And so, from the crescent wings of Salamence, we turn now to the depths, to a creature whose fury was already legend before the stone ever touched its scales. The common Gyarados is infamous enough. A living tempest that levels coastlines. A serpent born from the humiliation transformed into a tyrant. But the Megaform? That is not simply a stronger version. It is the biological overclocking of a brain already wired, unstable brain, pushed past all thresholds of restraint. What emerges is not a partner. It is a pure, unfiltered engine of destruction. When the Mega Stone touches Gyarados, the transformation begins not with the body, but with the mind. The brain itself becomes flooded with energy, a surge that bypasses every inhibitory circuit. Where before there was anger, now there is only a singular, all-consumed signal: destroy. The creature does not simply lose its temper, it loses the very capacity for anything else. Memory, loyalty, even the ability to recognize its own trainer. All of it is stripped away in the seconds of evolution. The result is a state of pure fury, a mind operating at maximum output with no governor, no off switch. It is as if the Pokemon's consciousness is replaced by a candle, and the mega energy is a hurricane. The physical price matches the mental toll. As the body expands, the scales and fins are subjected to massive pressure. You can almost hear it. The deep, groaning strain of tissue-forced growth. The fins tear at the edges, the scales buckle and compress. It is not a graceful bloom. It is an explosion contained within the shape of a serpent. The dorsal fin especially, that iconic sail, becomes a towering blade, stretched taut until it looks like it might snap. Every inch of Gyarados' frame screams from the stress of the sudden spurt, yet the creature feels none of it. The rage has already consumed all sensation beyond the need to lash out. This is where the bond between trainer and Pokémon becomes not just strained, but irrelevant. In the heat of battle, a trainer might try to return a Mega Gyarados to its Pokéball, to end the transformation early, to protect both the Pokémon and everyone nearby, but the red light from the ball fails. The rage holds the body in place, refusing the recall mechanism. The Pokéball's energy simply cannot override the sheer force of will, if it can even be called will. The Gyarados is no longer a Pokémon that can be commanded. It is a force of nature that has been given a body, and it will not be confined until the battle is over, or until the energy fades. That is the terrible truth. Once the rage takes hold, you have lost control. You can only wait, and waiting is dangerous, because in that state, there is no higher thought. The instinct to destroy is absolute. The Gyarados will turn on anything. Wild Pokémon, the landscape, your own team, even you. It does not recognize friend from foe, because the concept of friend no longer exists in its mind. It has become a biological weapon, a living storm given form by an ancient power that seems to care nothing for the creature wearing it. There is a reason, perhaps, that the lore surrounding Mega Evolution takes on such a dark tone when it reaches the atrocious Pokémon. For all the body horror of Houndoom and Scizor, for the loss of self is the most chilling price, and with Mega Gyarados, that loss is absolute. The water serpent becomes a vessel for nothing but wrath. And yet this brutality may have roots far older than any trainer's ambition. Some trace the origin of Mega Stones back to a time of great war, a conflict that reshaped the Kalos region itself, a war that ended with a weapon of untold power, fired 3,000 years ago. The same energy that gave rise to these stones may have been born from that ancient cataclysm, and if that is true, then every time a Gyarados Mega evolves, it is not just a Pokémon losing control, it is a relic of a forgotten tragedy awakening. What that war really happened in that war, and what did the ultimate weapon leave behind? That is the story we will uncover next in the Ancient War of Kalos. Before we dive deeper into this incredible journey, I'm curious, where in the world are you watching this from? Drop a comment below and let our global community know. And if you're finding this as mind-blowing as I am, hit that like button to help more people discover this story. The previous chapter left us with the image of a Gyarados consumed by such overwhelming rage that its very mind became a furnace of pure instinct. That transformation, stripping away everything but the will to destroy, was not an anomaly. It was a symptom of something far older and far more terrible, a force that was never meant to be touched by mortal hands. To understand why Mega Evolution carries such a heavy cost, we must step back 3,000 years into a time when the land of Kalos was not a peaceful region of chateaus and gardens, but a battlefield soaked in the blood of thousands. 3,000 years ago, a devastating war tore through the ancient kingdom of Kalos. It was a conflict that seemed to have no end, a grinding machine of suffering that consumed entire generations. Armies clashed in fields that would later become serene meadows, their cries swallowed by the roar of steel and fire. And at the heart of this endless war stood a king named Zed, who was not a tyrant in the traditional sense, but a ruler who had lost everything. His beloved Floette, the Pokémon that had been his constant companion, was killed in the fighting. And in that moment of profound grief, AZ made a decision that would forever alter the course of Pokémon history. He would build a weapon. Not just any weapon, but the ultimate weapon. A device so powerful that it could end the war in an instant. But to power such a machine, he needed energy beyond anything the world had ever seen. He needed the life force of countless living beings. And so AZ turned to the Pokémon of Kalos. Thousands upon thousands of Pokémon were captured, forced into the heart of the weapon, and their life energy was drained away in a single catastrophic pulse. The weapon fired and the war ended. But the cost was unimaginable. The very ground of Kalos was saturated with the energy of death, a raw and terrible power that did not simply dissipate. That energy, left over from the ultimate act of destruction, crystallized into the first megastones. They formed where the blast had been strongest, at places where the boundary between life and death had been torn open. The stones themselves are not natural. They are scars, fossilized remnants of a holocaust that fed on the souls of Pokémon. And this is why Mega Evolution feels so wrong to those who study it closely. The power you draw from a Megastone is not merely a boost in stats. It is a resonance with that ancient act of sacrifice. A faint echo of the moment when thousands of Pokémon gave their lives to fuel a king's grief. This is where the legends of Xerneas and Yveltal become inseparable from the story of Mega Evolution. Xerneas, the life Pokémon, embodies the energy of creation, growth, and renewal. Yveltal, the destruction Pokémon, embodies the energy of death, decay, and the draining of life force. The ultimate weapon was designed to channel both. It drew from the death energy of Yveltal to destroy its enemies, but it also required the life energy of Xerneas to sustain its own structure. In firing the weapon, Azid created a permanent imbalance between these two forces. The megastones that remain are echoes of this imbalance, objects that contain a trace of Yveltal's destructive hunger and a trace of Xerneas' stolen vitality. When a Pokémon mega evolves, it taps into that fractured reservoir, and the transformation is never entirely stable. Consider the implications for a moment. Every time a trainer activates a megastone, they are awakening a power that was born from genocide. The stone in their hand is a relic of the war that killed countless innocent Pokémon, and the energy that flows into their partner is tainted by that original violence. It is no wonder that the Pokédex describes mega evolutions in terms of pain, rage, and loss of control. The power is not clean. It is a ghost, a memory of suffering that refuses to be silenced. Azid himself did not escape the consequences of his actions. After the weapon fired, his Floette was revived, but she was changed. She carried a flower that glowed with the same life and death energy that powered the weapon. And AZ, immortalized by the same blast that ended the war, wandered the earth for 3,000 years. Haunted by what he had done, his story is a cautionary tale. The ultimate weapon brought peace, but at a price that could never be repaid. And the mega evolution phenomenon that persists in Kalos today is a direct inheritance of that ancient tragedy. The connection to Xerneas and Yveltal runs even deeper than the weapon itself. The energies they represent are not simply opposites. They are two faces of the same coin, each necessary for the other to exist. The megastones, forged in the crucible of war, blur the line between the two. A Pokémon that mega evolves may gain incredible strength, but it also opens itself to the death aspect. Its body is pushed beyond its limits, its mind overwhelmed by raw power, because that power was never meant to be channeled through a living creature. It was meant to destroy. So as we consider the dark secret of every mega evolution, we must remember that the roots of this power lie not in a bond of trust, but in a king's desperation. 3,000 years ago, a war ended because thousands of Pokémon died to create a weapon that would harness the forces of life and death themselves. The megastones that remain are the scars of that moment, and every time a trainer uses one, they are stepping into the shadow of that ancient tragedy. The bond between trainer and Pokémon may be real, but it is built on a foundation of ash. And what happened after the weapon fired? When the dust settled and AZ was left alone with his immortal grief, is a story that leads us directly into the aftermath of that choice. A story of consequences that still ripple through the present day. In the next chapter, we will explore the ultimate weapon's aftermath and how the fallout of that single act shaped the very fabric of the Pokémon world. The weapon fired. 3,000 years ago, in the heart of what we now call Kalos, a beam of pure terrible light erupted from the earth. It was not a ray of sunlight or a burst of natural energy. It was a weapon built to end a war, powered by the life force of countless Pokémon. And when that light struck the battlefield, it did not simply destroy, it transformed the very ground beneath it. In that single cataclysmic moment, the ultimate weapon released a wave of energy that rippled through the stone, through the soil, through the bones of the land itself. The immediate devastation was obvious. Entire armies turned to dust, cities crumbled, and the landscape was scarred beyond recognition. But what happened next was far more insidious, and it would echo through the ages in a way no one could have predicted. The stones of the earth were irradiated, not with radiation as we think of it today, but with a concentrated, lingering residue of that primordial power. The same force that had torn life from the world now saturated the rock, the crystal, the very minerals that had once been ordinary. And in some cases, those stones had not been empty. They had been the final resting places of Pokémon caught in the blast. When the weapon fired, it did not merely kill, it infused. The remains of those Pokémon, their bones, their scales, their very essence, were fused into the surrounding stone, creating something new, something neither alive nor dead, but charged with the echo of a violent death. This is the theory that many scholars and whisperers of lost history have come to accept. That megastones are not natural minerals. They are the irradiated remains of Pokémon who perished in the blast of the ultimate weapon. Each stone, with its unique colour and pattern, corresponds to a specific species. The pattern is not a decoration. It is a fossilized memory of the creature that once lived. And when a trainer holds that stone, when they channel their bond through a keystone, they are not merely unlocking power, they are reopening a wound. They are calling upon the ghost of a Pokémon that died in agony 3 millennia ago. But the weapon's aftermath did not stop with the stones. The entire region of Kalos was bathed in that energy. It seeped into the water, the air, the plants. It altered the very fabric of the environment. And because of this lingering radiation, the Kalos region became uniquely capable of hosting mega evolution. The bond between trainer and Pokémon is necessary, yes, but it is the residual energy of that ancient cataclysm that makes the transformation possible. Without it, megastones would be inert. They are like batteries charged by a tragedy that will never fully dissipate. This is why mega evolution is temporary. The Pokémon cannot sustain that level of energy for long. The body rebels against it. The mind strains. The transformation is a forced return to a state of extreme stress. A survival response encoded in the stone by a death that was neither natural nor peaceful. And when the battle ends, the energy recedes, but the price has been paid. The price of mega evolution is not some abstract cost. It is rooted in an ancient genocide. The ultimate weapon killed indiscriminately. It removed life from the world on a scale that is almost impossible to comprehend. And in doing so, it created a reservoir of power that we now tap into for our own purposes. Every time a trainer mega evolves their Pokémon, they are drawing from that well of suffering. They are channeling the stolen life force of thousands, perhaps millions, of creatures who never consented to become fuel for a weapon. This is the dark side of the bond. The bond is real, yes. It is trust, it is love, it is synchronization. But the power that flows through that bond originates in blood. The stones are not gifts. They are relics of a war crime. And every time a Pokémon wears a megastone, it carries the weight of that history. The lingering radiation in Kalos is not a blessing, it is a scar, and it allows temporary evolution because the land itself is still wounded. The energy is still leaking from that ancient wound, and we have learned to harness it for battle, but the cost is not paid in the moment. It was paid 3,000 years ago by innocent lives who had no say in the matter. Now, consider what happens when a Pokémon that has no direct link to that war carries a Mega Stone. Consider the primal memory that might be awakened in species that existed long before the Kalos War. Species whose ancestors may have witnessed that terrible light. One such Pokémon is Aerodactyl, a creature from a time when the world was very different, and when it mega evolves, something far older than the ultimate weapon stirs within the stone, something that remembers a time before bonds, before trainers, before power had a price. That story will unfold next. The aftermath of the ultimate weapon left scars upon the land that would never fully heal, but it also left something else. Something buried beneath the ash and the silence, waiting to be unearthed. The stones that absorbed the weapon's energy did not simply become conduits of power. They became prisons for memory, and in the case of one ancient creature, that memory was not a fragment of a lost era. It was the blueprint for a resurrection. Consider the Aerodactyl you know from the modern world. A Pokémon brought back from extinction through the miracle of fossil revival. A creature of the sky from a time before humans walked the earth. But what if I told you that the Aerodactyl you meet in battle, the one with the sharp fangs and the leathery wings, is not the whole picture? What if the fossil revival process, as remarkable as it is, could only restore a shadow of the original beast? The bones can be reanimated, the skin regrown, the heartbeat restarted, but the raw, untamed essence of the prehistoric apex predator, that was lost, until the Keystone called, and the Megastone answered, "Welcome back." This is Chapter 13, Mega Aerodactyl and the Primal Memory. When the bond between trainer and Pokémon snaps into place, when the energies of the Megastone and Keystone resonate, something strange happens to a modern Aerodactyl. It does not simply grow stronger. It does not merely change its appearance. It reverts. The transformation is not an evolution in the traditional sense. It is a restoration, a peeling away of thousands of generations of learned behavior, of genetic drift, of the gentle softening that comes with survival in a world no longer ruled by colossal beasts. Mega Aerodactyl is not a new form. It is the true form, the one that tore through the Jurassic skies, the one that never should have been tamed. But the process of reclaiming that form is not gentle. Watch the transformation closely, and you will see it. The jagged stone growths that erupt from the body, thrusting through the skin like fossilized bone, breaking free from a tomb. The rocky spikes along the spine, the serrated ridges on the wings, the stone-like crown that juts from the skull. These are not armor. They are the remnants of an ancient biology, mineral deposits that once reinforced the creature's body against the violence of its world. But they do not grow naturally in the modern Aerodactyl. They have to be forced out, pushed through flesh that has forgotten how to accommodate them. The pain is immediate, the pain is constant, and it is not just physical. The true horror of Mega Aerodactyl lies in what the transformation unlocks within the mind. Every Pokémon carries the echoes of its ancestors in its genes, but for most, those echoes are faint whispers, half-forgotten instincts that guide hunting or migration. For Mega Aerodactyl, the echoes become a flood. The modern brain is suddenly inundated with the memories of its primal forebears, not as stories or images, but as raw sensory experience. The smell of the ancient seas, the thunder of rival predators, the hunger, the endless, gnawing hunger of a world where every meal was a battle and every moment was survival. Imagine waking up one day and remembering every fight your great-grandfather ever fought, feeling every wound, every victory, every moment of terror as if it was your own. That is what happens to Aerodactyl when it mega evolves. The ancient memories do not just come back, they overwrite. The modern identity, the bond with its trainer, the learned habits of cooperation and trust, all of it is crushed under the weight of a consciousness that predates civilization itself. The Pokémon you knew is still there, buried deep, but it is no longer in control. And that is why this perfect form is a source of constant irritation and violence. The Mega Aerodactyl is constantly irritated, not by its trainer, not by its surroundings, but by the mismatch between its own body and the ghost of its ancestors. The stone growths are uncomfortable. The primal instincts scream for action. The memories of a world that no longer exists create a deep, unending restlessness. This is a creature that feels trapped, not in a cage, but in its own time. In battle, that irritation turns to ferocity. The Mega Aerodactyl attacks with a savagery that goes beyond strategy. It is not trying to win. It is trying to silence the noise. Every crash of its rocky claws, every shriek that tears from its throat, is an attempt to drown out the ancient voices that will not stop whispering. It is a being of pure, frustrated power, lashing out because it cannot escape its own history. Some trainers who have witnessed a Mega Aerodactyl up close describe a change in its eyes. The bright, intelligent gaze of the modern Pokémon dims, replaced by something older, something colder, a stare that has seen the meteor fall, that has watched the continents shift, that has known the weight of extinction and the terror of being the last of its kind. For a moment, that ancient spirit looks out from behind the creature's face, and it is not happy to be here. This is the price of perfection. The form that should be the ultimate expression of Aerodactyl's potential is, in truth, a painful reawakening of a past that was never meant to come back. The Mega Stone does not grant new power. It unlocks the old power, the power that once ruled a world of tooth and claw, and in doing so, it forces the modern Aerodactyl to relive every scar, every loss, every instinct that made its ancestors survive. The result is a Pokémon that is forever at war with itself, forever torn between the bond it has formed in the present and the wild, untamable spirit of the deep past. But if the memory of the ancient world can be so painful, what happens when the bond itself is put under pressure? What happens when the energy of Mega Evolution moves through a Pokémon whose entire existence is built on understanding and channeling aura? An energy that is deeply connected to emotion and will. The answer lies in a steel-blue warrior, a Pokémon whose loyalty is legendary, and whose transformation pushes that loyalty to its breaking point. That is a story for another night. For now, let the image of the sky predator fade, its stone wings catching the last light of a setting sun, its cries echoing across a world that has forgotten what it once was. And as you drift deeper into the quiet, know that some memories are better left buried. Rest. Well, that stone growth that pierces Aerodactyl's skin during Mega Evolution is a powerful reminder that these transformations often leave physical marks. But for some Pokémon, the damage isn't just external. For Lucario, the price of Mega Evolution is measured in a currency far more intimate than torn flesh or jagged fossils. It is measured in the very energy that defines its existence. Aura. Lucario are born with an innate connection to the life force that flows through all things. They sense emotions, read intentions, and perceive the world as a web of pulses and waves. This gift makes them incredible partners, but it also makes them vulnerable. When a Lucario activates its Mega Stone, the transformation is not merely a physical upgrade. It is a detonation of that inner energy, a blast of pure aura that floods every nerve, every muscle, every thought. The power is overwhelming, and the struggle to contain it is the central drama of this form. From the moment the stone begins to glow, the Lucario experiences a surge unlike anything it has ever felt. Its aura, normally a gentle current that flows in harmony with its body and mind, becomes a raging river. The creature fights to hold that force within, to channel it without being swept away, but the energy is too vast. It spills out, leaking from the aura sensors on its chest, from its eyes, from every point of contact with the world. This is not a transformation that grants control. It is a test of control, and the margin for error is razor thin. When a Lucario fails to contain the aura storm, something terrible happens. The fighting style that emerges is cold, efficient, and utterly devoid of compassion. It is a heartless style. The Lucario no longer reads the opponent's aura to anticipate, to understand, to outthink. It reads only to find the fastest path to destruction. Every move becomes lethal every strike perfectly aimed at a weakness. The Pokémon no longer feels the bond with its trainer, because the aura that once connected them is now a blinding storm. In that state, the Lucario is not a partner. It is a weapon, and a weapon does not hesitate, does not mourn, does not protect. It only destroys. The physical signs of this internal battle are unmistakable. As the aura becomes too much to handle, it begins to blacken the Lucario's fur. Those streaks are not mere color changes. They are the physical manifestation of corruption, of energy turning inward, burning the very essence of the Pokémon from the inside. The black streaks spread like cracks in crystal, following the paths of the overflow. They signal that the aura has moved beyond the Lucario's capacity to hold it. The body is being written upon by a force that is no longer fully bound. And here is the most haunting part of this transformation. The trainer, the one who holds the keystone, is not a detached observer. The bond that makes Mega Evolution possible is two-way. When the Lucario's aura rages, that rage, that sensory overload, flows back through the link. The trainer's own soul is at risk of being overwhelmed. They feel what the Lucario feels, the burn, the fury, the overwhelming pressure. In that moment, the line between two beings blurs. The trainer may lose themselves in the storm, their own thoughts drowned by the flood of aura. Some records speak of trainers who, after a battle with a Mega Lucario, could not shake the feeling of rage for days. They would snap at loved ones, wake in cold sweats, see the world through a filter of aggression. The price of this power is not paid by the Lucario alone. It is a terrible irony. Lucario are among the most empathetic of all Pokémon, creatures that seek harmony and understanding, and yet their Mega Evolution forces them to suppress that very nature or be consumed by it. The Heartless style is a survival mechanism, a way to cope with the impossible pressure by shutting down everything except the fight. But in shutting down the heart, the Lucario risks losing the very bond that made the transformation possible. This is the story of Mega Lucario, but it echoes a question that lingers over every Mega form. Is this power something that can be used without paying a price that touches not just the body, but the soul? And if the trainer's own soul can be overwhelmed, what does that mean for the ethics of ever activating such a transformation? That is a question we will explore in the next chapter, as we turn to the broader implications of what it means to willingly subject a Pokémon to a change that may leave permanent marks on both of you. The ethics of Mega Evolution is not a simple lesson. It is a moral labyrinth, and we are only now beginning to see its walls. And so we saw Lucario, the paragon of aura and loyalty, pushed to a breaking point. The transformation that was supposed to be the ultimate expression of trust instead turned its fighting style heartless, mechanical, as if the very soul of the Pokémon had been swallowed by the power. It raises a question that has lingered over every Mega Evolution we have discussed so far, one that the games themselves began to whisper in their darkest entries. Is this power truly a gift, or is it a form of cruelty dressed in the language of partnership? This is not just a question for lore enthusiasts. It is a debate that exists within the Pokémon world itself. Among the researchers, the professors, the organizations that study these phenomena, there is no consensus. Some see Mega Evolution as the pinnacle of the bond between human and Pokémon. Others see it as something far more troubling, and maybe inflicting harm on the creature that is supposed to be your closest companion, and no group has articulated this cons more clearly than the Ether Foundation. You may remember the Ether Foundation from the Alola region. They are presented as a conservationist organization dedicated to protecting Pokémon and their habitats. Their public face is one of compassion and scientific rigor, but behind the scenes, their lead researcher, Professor Banette, and others have documented the biological toll of Mega Evolution with clinical precision. In their reports, they note the spike in cortisol, the elevated heart rates, the tremors that persist after the transformation ends. They do not use words like pain or suffering lightly, but the data suggests that for some species, Mega evolution is not an act of harmony, it is an act of stress. One of the most cited Aether Foundation documents is a comparative study of mega evolution reactions across different species. It found that Pokémon with naturally aggressive temperaments, like Gyarados or Tyranitar, showed the most dramatic changes in brain activity. Their stress hormones spiked to levels normally seen only during life or death encounters. And yet, those same Pokémon also showed the greatest combat effectiveness. The Foundation's ethics board was split. Some argued that if the Pokémon was willing, if the bond was strong enough, then the temporary distress was an acceptable price. Others countered that true consent in a creature that cannot speak is impossible to verify, and that the very act of activating a Megastone might override the Pokémon's own will. This is the crux of the ethical dilemma. The games give us two competing narratives. One is the bond narrative, the story that Mega Evolution is the ultimate proof of trust. You see it in the anime, where trainers and their Pokémon synchronize their hearts, and the transformation is portrayed as a beautiful, almost spiritual union. That narrative is real in its own way. It is the story the games want you to believe when you press the button and watch your Pokémon glow with new power. But the other narrative, the biological horror reality, is written in the Pokédex entries of later generations. It is the story of a creature whose bones are forced to grow, whose skin is burned, whose mind is flooded with uncontrollable rage. Both stories are canon. Both exist at the same time. And that contradiction is what makes Mega Evolution so unsettling. You as the player are the hero. You are the one who catches these Pokémon, who raises them, who takes them into battle. And when you activate that Mega Stone, you are participating in something that might causing them pain. The game never asks you to question it. It rewards you with a stronger moveset, a higher stat total, a flashier animation. But the lore, if you dig deep enough, whispers that you are complicit. You are the one who pushes the button. You are the one who asks your partner to endure that transformation. The bond narrative lets you feel good about it. But the biological horror narrative lingers in the background like a shadow. This is not just about individual Pokémon. It is about the entire system that makes Mega Evolution possible. The stones themselves we have seen are tied to the ancient tragedy of Kalos, to the ultimate weapon, to a war that ended 3,000 years ago. The energy that fuels Mega Evolution may be the same energy that once killed and revived an entire region. It is a power born from suffering, and we are still using it. The Aether Foundation's research suggests that the long-term effects of repeated Mega Evolution are not fully understood. There are cases of Pokémon that seem to become more aggressive even outside of battle, after being used in Mega form too frequently. There are reports of trainers who noticed their partners flinching at the sight of the keystone. The Foundation's conclusion was cautious. They did not call for a ban. They did not condemn the practice. But they did recommend that trainers undergo psychological screening and that Mega Evolution should be used sparingly, only when absolutely necessary, and never for sport. But of course, in the games we use it constantly. We Mega Evolve our Pokémon against wild Rattata, against random trainers, against the champion. The mechanic is fun. It is satisfying. It makes us feel powerful. And that feeling, that desire for power, is exactly what the lore warns us about. The bond narrative is the justification. The horror is the truth we choose to ignore. So where does that leave us? The player character, the hero of the story, is not innocent. You are the one who carries the keystone. You are the one who activates it. In doing so, you are participating in a cycle that began with a weapon of mass destruction. You are the heir to that legacy, and the question becomes, can you still call yourself a hero if your power comes at the cost of your partner's well-being? This tension is perhaps most visible in a Mega Evolution that has rarely been discussed in the same breath as the dark entries, but deserves a closer look. The transformation that changes not just the Pokémon's body, but its very relationship with its trainer. The form where the bond is twisted into something else entirely. We will explore that in the next chapter when we turn to the case of Mega Kangaskhan and the loss of childhood. The previous chapter ended with a question that lingers in the air like smoke from a dying fire. Is Mega Evolution an act of cruelty? The Ether Foundation researchers debated it, but their words were clinical, detached. They had never watched a mother's eyes change. They had never seen what happens when a Kangaskhan, a Pokémon whose very existence is built around the sacred bond between a parent and a child. Kangaskhan is unique among all Pokémon. In its base form, it is a gentle giant, a marsupial-like creature that carries its baby in a pouch on its belly. That baby is not a separate evolution. It is a constant companion, a child that never leaves its mother's side until it is ready to stand alone. The Pokédex tells us that Kangaskhan raises its young with fierce protection, that it will fight to the death to shield its offspring from harm. This is the natural order. The mother nurtures, the baby grows, and one day, the bond becomes memory. But Mega Evolution shatters that order. When the Mega Stone and Keystone link, the transformation sweeps over Kangaskhan like a tidal wave. The mother grows larger, her muscles swell, her hide thickens into armor, but it is the baby that changes in a way that should not be possible. Inside the pouch, the infant Kangaskhan begins to grow. Not gradually, not through the slow miracle of time, but in an instant. A forced, unnatural surge of size and strength. The baby that was once small enough to curl in a warm pocket now becomes as large as its mother, bursting from the pouch, standing beside her as a partner in battle. But it is still a baby. Its eyes, wide and uncertain, hold no experience of the world beyond the pouch. It has never chosen to fight. It has never understood danger. And this is the dark secret that the game mechanic hides so neatly. In battle, Mega Kangaskhan gains the ability Parental Bond, allowing it to strike twice, once from the mother, once from the child. But what does that second strike cost? The baby is not evolved. It is not ready. It is being forced to mimic the violence of its mother, because the Mega Energy demands it. The Pokédex entries from the Alola region describe this form with a chilling neutrality. The explosive energy melts the baby out of the pouch, and it grows to match its mother's size. The word melts is the one that stays with you, as if the transformation is not a growth, but a dissolution of innocence, a reshaping of the child into a weapon. Consider the emotional toll on the mother. Kangaskhan is defined by its maternal instinct. It knows the weight of its child, the heartbeat against its skin, the softness of its fur. But Mega Evolution forces that child to leave the pouch, to stand in the open, to face opponents that could crush it with a single blow. The mother cannot stop this. The transformation is not voluntary for either of them. She watches her baby grow into a stranger beside her, its face unfamiliar, its body hardened by energy that was never meant for a developing creature. And then the battle begins. She must fight alongside this copy of her child, knowing that every hit it takes is real, that the pain it feels is amplified by the unnatural change. In the wild, a Kangaskhan would fight to keep its baby safe. In Mega Evolution, it fights while its baby is in the line of fire. And what happens when the battle ends? The energy fades. The mother shrinks back to her normal size. The baby shrinks too, returning to the pouch, smaller, older but still a baby. But the experience has left a mark. Developmental consequences are not something the games measure, but the lore hints at them. The infant Kangaskhan has been exposed to the sensory overload of combat, the adrenaline of violence, the memory of pain. It has grown and shrunk in a matter of minutes. Is that growth real, or is it a scar? In nature, young Kangaskhan learn by watching from the pouch, protected, observing. After Mega Evolution, that baby has tasted a world it was not ready for. It may become more aggressive. It may cling tighter to its mother. It may never fully understand what happened to its body. The connection to the Ancient Kalos War grows stronger here. If Mega Stones are indeed remnants of Pokémon, caught in the blast of the ultimate weapon, then Mega Kangaskhan may be a relic of a tragedy. A mother and child caught in a wave of energy that warped their bond into a weapon. 3,000 years later, trainers activate that same energy, not knowing they are reenacting a moment of separation and forced growth. The baby Kangaskhan, in its mega form, is a ghost of that ancient pain. It grows not because it is ready, but because the stone demands it. And yet, we call this power. We celebrate it. We breed Kangaskhan for battle, knowing that its mega form is one of the most feared competitive forces in the Pokémon world. Parental bond lets it strike twice, break through focus sashes, shred through teams. But the price is paid in the quiet moments no trainer sees. After the battle, when the camera stops rolling, the mother Kangaskhan looks down at her baby. The baby is smaller now, back in the pouch, but its eyes are older. They have seen too much, and the mother knows, she knows, that she cannot protect her child from the power she was forced to unleash. The bond that Mega Evolution was supposed to strengthen may actually be the very thing that weakens it. There is a reason the Alolan Pokédex entries grew dark. They were not accidents, they were warnings. And with Kangaskhan, the warning is written on the face of a child that should never have been asked to fight. The next chapter will take us into the water, where speed becomes a blade that cuts both ways. Mega Sharpedo rides a torpedo like fury, but the price of that speed is a hunger that never fades. When a Pokémon becomes nothing but acceleration and teeth, what part of its soul is left behind? That story waits just beneath the surface. From the unsettling sight of a baby Kangaskhan forced to grow up in an instant, we turn now to the ocean's dark apex predator, a creature whose entire existence is built around speed and violence. Sharpedo is already a living torpedo, a creature of pure, relentless aggression. But when it undergoes Mega Evolution, that aggression is not merely amplified. It is weaponized in a way that turns its own body into a tool of self-inflicted suffering. Consider the transformation of Sharpedo's snout. In its base form, that snout is already sharp, designed to ram and tear through prey. But under the influence of the Mega Stone, the snout does not simply become sharper, it becomes serrated, jagged. Tooth-like ridges erupt from the bone and cartilage, pushing through the skin from the inside. This is not a smooth metamorphosis. It is a violent rearrangement of the skull, where new growth forces its way outward, leaving the surface raw and painful. The very thing Sharpedo uses to strike becomes a source of constant grinding pain. Every time it rams into an opponent, that serrated edge grates against the wound it creates, sending shockwaves of agony back through the shark's own head. There is no relief, only the promise of more damage. And then there are the yellow scars. Look closely at any image of Mega Sharpedo, and you will see those bright yellow markings crisscrossing its body. They are often mistaken for natural patterns or even decorative stripes. But the lore tells a darker truth. Those yellow marks are not new features. They are old wounds, scars that have healed over long ago, now forced open again by the surge of Mega Evolution energy. The transformation strain is so intense that the skin splits along the lines of past injuries. The yellow glow is not a sign of power. It is the light of raw, exposed tissue, weeping with energy. Imagine a body that has healed from countless battles, only to have every significant injury torn open again in a single moment. That is the price Mega Sharpedo pays for its enhanced form. The purpose of all this is speed. Mega Sharpedo becomes one of the fastest things in the ocean. It can outrun almost any water type, closing distance with terrifying efficiency. But that speed comes at a cost that is measured in exhaustion. After a single high-speed pursuit, the Pokémon is left utterly drained. Its muscles burn with lactic acid. Its gills work overtime, struggling to extract enough oxygen from the water. The same energy that propels it forward also overheats its body to dangerous levels. In the water, heat dissipates slowly. Mega Sharpedo's internal temperature rises so high that the water around it begins to steam. It is literally boiling itself from the inside out. The biological overheating is not a side effect. It is the central mechanism of the transformation. Every burst of speed is a controlled burn, and once the fight ends, the animal collapses, gasping, its body trembling as it tries to cool down. This is not a form that can be sustained. It is a short, violent flare of existence, a few seconds of unparalleled ferocity, followed by a brutal crash. The Mega Evolution for Sharpedo is not an evolution into a higher state. It is a desperate overclock, a pushing of every biological system to its breaking point. The shark becomes a weapon that damages itself with every use, and yet there is something almost tragic about it. Sharpedo is not a bad Pokémon. It is a survivor, molded by the harshness of the ocean. But in this transformation, it becomes a creature of pure, mindless impulse. The pain from its serrated snout and its reopened scars feeds into a feedback loop of rage. It cannot think, cannot strategize. It can only chase and tear. As we consider the shattered jaws of another Mega Evolution, we begin to see a pattern. There is a Pokémon whose Mega form literally breaks its own mandible, turning its face into a trap of shattered bone and frozen pain. That is a story for another chapter, the story of Mega Glalie and its broken jaw. But for now, let us sit with the image of a shark, scarred and steaming, racing through the dark water, paying for every inch of speed with its own flesh. The previous chapter ended with Mega Sharpedo, a creature whose own speed turned its body into a weapon that tore open old scars. The price of power was carved into its flesh, reopened every time it pushed beyond its limits. And yet, as brutal as that transformation was at least Sharpedo could still close its mouth. At least it could still feed. With Mega Glalie, even that basic dignity is stripped away. Glalie in its normal form is already an unsettling Pokémon, a floating, disembodied head of black ice, with a face that seems frozen in a perpetual snarl. Its mouth is a jagged crack that runs across its lower half, lined with teeth that look more like stalactites than fangs. It is a creature designed to bite and swallow, to trap prey in its icy jaws and crush them before freezing them solid. That is its natural hunting strategy. That is how it survives. But when the Mega Stone activates, when the energy of Mega Evolution surges through that frozen body, something goes terribly wrong. The transformation begins like many others. A blinding light, a surge of power. But for Glalie, the change is not one of growth or armor. It is a breaking. The lower jaw, already fused into the ice of its face, begins to crack. The ice splinters not outward, but inward, as if the tremendous force of the evolution is pushing the jaw farther and farther down, unhinging it from its natural resting place. By the time the light fades, Mega Glalie's jaw hangs open at an angle that is physically impossible. The hinge is shattered. The mouth can no longer close. And think about what that means for a creature whose entire existence revolves around biting. Glalie cannot hunt in this form. It cannot feed. The very act of eating, the most fundamental instinct of survival, is denied to it. The jaw dangles uselessly, a gaping chasm that leads directly into its throat, but no muscle can pull it shut. The teeth that once crushed ice and bone now point outward like a cage that can never be locked. Mega Glalie is a predator that can no longer consume, but the horror does not stop there, because that open mouth, that broken jaw is not silent. From the depths of its throat, a constant stream of freezing air pours forth, an endless exhalation of sub-zero breath that never ceases. In its normal state, Glalie controls its icy power deliberately, releasing it in focused blasts when it chooses to attack. In its mega form, that control is lost. The cold simply pours out of it, unstoppable, unending like a leak in a frozen dam. And this is where the price becomes truly cruel. That freezing air does not just spews outward, it also flows backward. It fills Glalie's own body, seeping into its internal cavities, coating its organs in frosty organs, with a cold so intense that it begins to crystallize the very structures that keep the Pokémon alive. The Pokédex entries hint at this devastation. The constant emission of cold air begins to damage its own internal organs, freezing them from the inside. The creature is slowly being killed by its own breath. Every second it spends in this form, it is freezing itself from the inside out. And you can see it. You can see the cracks spreading across its icy hide, the fissures that spiderweb out from the hinge of its jaw, the way its body appears to be fracturing under the strain. Mega Glalie does not look like a creature that has been empowered. It looks like a creature that is falling apart. The ice that forms its body is no longer a solid shell. It is a brittle, breaking crust that splinters with every movement. The power, the cracks, the very structure that defines Glalie's existence is crumbling. This is the visual representation of a creature literally falling apart under the weight of its own power. The jaw dangles, the mouth stays open, the cold leaks out, the body shatters. There is no elegance, no grace, no triumphant pose. There is only the slow destruction of a Pokémon that was never meant to contain this much energy. And yet in battle, Mega Glalie is devastating. Its sheer unrelenting cold does not care about the damage it causes to its own body. It blasts forward, a missile of cracking ice and uncontrolled frost, leaving trails of shattered crystals behind it. But every moment of that assault is a moment of self-inflicted harm. The power it wields is killing it, and it cannot stop. The Mega Evolution will not end until the battle is over, or until the Pokémon collapses. The trainer who activates this form is commanding a weapon that is consuming itself. So we are left with a question that haunts every Mega Evolution we have explored so far. What are these stones really? Where does this energy come from? And why does it so often demand such a terrible toll? The connection between the Mega Stone and the Pokémon is not just a bond between trainer and creature. It is a link to something far older, far stranger, and far less forgiving. And the mystery of the Mega Stones is a mystery that reaches back into the deepest, darkest corners of Kalos' ancient history. A history written in war, in loss, and in the echoes of a weapon that reshaped the world still cannot forget. We ended the last chapter with Glalie's broken jaw, a chilling reminder that Mega Evolution does not simply empower, it reshapes, and sometimes breaks, the very structure of a Pokémon's body. And if such transformation can fracture bone, what about the source of that power itself? What exactly are Megastones? We know they are required, we know they are rare, but their true nature has always lingered in the shadows of the lore, like a whisper from a forgotten age. Tonight we turn our attention to the stones themselves, not just as items but as objects of study, mystery, and perhaps even as living relics. The chemical composition of Mega Stones is a mystery that has puzzled researchers across several regions. In Kalos, where they first appeared, scientists in the Lumiose Museum have attempted to analyze them, only to find their structure unlike any known mineral. They do not match the crystalline lattice of standard evolution stones, nor do they share the spectral signature of meteorites found elsewhere. Instead, Megastones seem to contain a unique energy signature, a frequency that resonates at a frequency that interacts directly with the life force of a Pokémon. This energy has been given many names, but the most telling comes from Team Flare. They called it Infinity Energy. Team Flare, the villainous organization of Kalos, was obsessed with this energy. They believed it was the key to creating and perfecting the world, to harnessing a power that transcended ordinary limits. Their ultimate weapon, the weapon that devastated Kalos 3,000 years ago, was powered by the same force. And what is that force? It is the very essence of life and death, channeled through the legendary Pokémon Xerneas and Yveltal. When AZ activated the ultimate weapon, he released a surge of infinity energy that warped the region. Many believe that the Megastones scattered across Kalos are fossilized remnants of that cataclysm. Stones that absorbed so much of this energy that they became permanently altered. They are, in a sense, artifacts of a tragedy. But here is where it gets stranger. Not every Pokémon can use a Megastone. Why can a Beedrill access a Megastone when a Butterfree cannot? Why is there a Megastone for Kangaskhan, but not for Snorlax? The answer may lie in a Pokémon's evolutionary history, its genetic predisposition to accept that specific energy. Some researchers theorize that only Pokémon with a certain ancestral lineage, perhaps those that existed during the time of the Kalos War, or those whose bodies were already attuned to primal energy, can trigger the resonance. Others suggest it is tied to the bond with a trainer, But even that bond cannot create a megastone where none exists. The stones themselves seem to choose. They are not just inert minerals. They appear to have a will of their own. This is the most unsettling theory of all, that megastones are sentient, not in the way a living creature is sentient, but in the way a memory can be. A memory pressed into stone, a fossilized emotion. Consider that each megastone corresponds to a specific species. The stones do not work on any other Pokémon. That implies a kind of recognition, a consciousness that says, "This is mine." Some ancient texts, buried in the ruins of the Kalos region, speak of the stones as the tears of the war, droplets of energy that fell from the ultimate weapon and crystallized, each carrying the suffering or the fury of a single Pokémon that perished in that conflict. If that is true, then when you activate a megastone, you are not merely evolving your Pokémon, you are awakening a ghost. You are letting that ancient, anguished soul merge with your partner's. And if that soul is the case, then the dark descriptions of mega evolution, the pain, the loss of control, the hostility, make a terrible kind of sense. Your Pokémon is not just transforming, its own body being pushed beyond its limits. It is also being inhabited by a foreign will, a will that remembers war, betrayal, and death. Mega Gengar becomes a creature of pure malice, because the stone holds that malice. Mega Tyranitar's back explodes because the stone's rage cannot be contained. The price of that power is not just physical, it is spiritual. The connection to Team Flare's infinity energy deepens this. Team Flare sought to recreate the energy of the ultimate weapon, to use it to power a new world without pain. But they did not understand the nature of that energy. They saw it as a resource, a fuel. They did not realize it was the remnant of lives lost. When Lysandre activated the ultimate weapon in the game's timeline, the devastating effect, the entire region is bathed in light, and Pokémon and people alike are either drained of life or granted immense, temporary power. That is the raw, uncontrolled infinity energy. Megastones are just a tiny, stable fragment of that same force. They are, in a way, the most dangerous battery ever created, because they remember what happened the first time that battery was discharged. So why certain Pokémon have stones while others do not? Perhaps it is not about power or potential. Perhaps it is about which Pokémon were present during that ancient war, which species witnessed the weapon's activation, which creatures were so fundamentally changed by exposure that their very essence became locked in the stone. The stones that exist today are the survivors of that catastrophe, each one a scar on the planet's memory. The Pokémon that can mega-evolve are not the strongest. They are the chosen inheritors of that scar. We have examined the jaw of Glalie, split and unhinged. We have studied the scars of Sharpedo, reopened by the energy surge. But now we must ask, if the transformation itself is unnatural, then what of those Pokémon who were created specifically to wield such power? What of Mewtwo, a being forged in a laboratory born, already a creature of artificial evolution, then given access to 2 different megastones, one for each of its forms? The next chapter steps into that laboratory, into the story of Mega Mewtwo X and Y, and asks, what happens when evolution is not just forced but designed? I hope you're as amazed by this as I am. If you want to stay updated on more content like this, make sure to subscribe and join our community of curious minds. Trust me, what's coming next will challenge everything you thought you knew. The chemical composition of the mega stones, as we explored in our last chapter, raises a quiet but persistent question. If these stones are conduits for infinity energy, the same raw life force that powered the ultimate weapon, then what happens when that energy is channeled into which you channel a being that was itself created to be the... Mewtwo was never meant to evolve. It was the endpoint of a long and secret project, a clone designed to surpass Mew, to be the single most powerful Pokémon on the planet. It was already the limit of artificial life, and then Mega Evolution arrived, offering it a form that the original creators never intended, never tested, never accounted for. The result is not one transformation, but two divergent paths, each representing a different kind of breakdown of Mewtwo's original design. Mega Mewtwo X embraces the physical, the raw muscle, the body reforged into a warrior. Its limbs thicken, its torso broadens, and its tail curls into a heavier, more powerful shape. The psychic energy that was once its primary tool is now subjugated, forced into a secondary role, while its fighting prowess takes center stage. The creature that was built to be the ultimate psychic weapon is now a brawler. Its muscles are so dense, so overdeveloped, that the very frame of its body seems to strain against itself. There is a tension in every movement, a sense that the skin might split if the power surges too high. Mega Mewtwo Y takes the opposite route. Its body becomes leaner, almost ethereal, as its tail extending into a long whip-like appendage that channels pure psychic force. Its head grows larger, the skull expanding to accommodate a brain now overloaded with telepathic potential. The physical form becomes almost an afterthought, a mere vessel for a mind that now sees everything all at once. Where X is a fist, Y is a thought, vast and cold and terrifyingly precise. But both forms share one thing. They are pushing against a limit that was never meant to be pushed. Mewtwo was designed to be the ultimate being. That was the promise of its creators. But they made it with a ceiling, a maximum output, a stable frame. Mega Evolution shatters that ceiling. It forces the already perfect engine to rev beyond redline. The strain is not merely physical, it is existential. Mewtwo is aware of itself, a being created by science, not by nature. It has always struggled with the question of its own identity, its autonomy, its right to exist. And now, Mega Evolution offers it more power than it ever asked for. Power that it did not earn, did not choose, and cannot fully control. The Pokédex entries for the two forms hint at the cost. Mega Mewtwo X is described as having muscles so massively developed that they never fully relax, even in sleep. The constant state of tension is exhausting, and the energy required to maintain that form drains the creature rapidly. Mega Mewtwo Y is described as becoming so focused on its psychic abilities that it loses interest in the physical world. Its thoughts become so vast that it can no longer connect with the beings around it. It becomes isolated inside its own mind, a prisoner of its own expanded consciousness. And perhaps the most unsettling detail is what is not written history does not say. Mewtwo was already a being made in a lab, a controlled environment. Its creators believed they had accounted for everything. They installed fail-safes, mental blocks, behavioral limiters. But Mega Evolution bypasses those. It taps into a deeper, older energy that predating all human interference. The fail-safes do not apply. The limiters mean nothing. Mewtwo finds itself confronting power it never intended to and cannot switch off. The bond with its trainer, the supposed requirement for Mega Evolution, becomes a lifeline, because without that anchor, without someone to remind it of its own name, there is a real danger that the boundless power consuming its every cell might simply erase the being it once was. This is not a story of a Pokémon reaching its true potential. This is a story of an artificial existence being exceeding its own definition. Mewtwo was built to be the ultimate weapon, is now facing the horrifying possibility that even the ultimate can be outgrown, and in that outgrowing, something essential might be lost. The dread is quiet, but it is there. The fear that the power you were given is never enough, and the power you take may destroy you. That fear will find its most cosmic expression in the next transformation that does not even Mewtwo cannot match. The sky itself will open, and a being of ancient origin will descend to claim a power not tied to any stone, but to the atmosphere of the planet. The story of Mega Rayquaza and the cosmic connection awaits just beyond the horizon. A tale of a dragon that did not ask for permission, only for the storm. And so we move from the artificial limit of Mewtwo to a being that exists entirely outside that framework. Mewtwo was built in a lab, its megastones forged by human hands, its power a product of science and will. But there is another Mega Evolution that answers to no human design, that obeys a different set of rules entirely. It belongs to Rayquaza, the sky-high Pokémon, And its transformation is not triggered by a stone in the traditional sense. It is a cosmic event, a ritual older than the Kalos War, older than the ultimate weapon, older perhaps than the concept of mega evolution itself, where every other mega requires a keystone in the trainer's hand, and a mega stone bonded to the Pokémon. Rayquaza does something else. It holds a meteorite, not a megastone, not a crafted relic, but a fragment of something that fell from the sky, and it does not hold that meteorite in a held item slot. It absorbs it, integrates it into its own biology, and then it ascends. The process is not triggered by a spark of infinity energy from a stone. It is activated by the sky itself, by the Delta Stream. The Delta Stream is a unique weather condition, one that only Rayquaza can call upon. In the games, it negates the weaknesses of flying types, removing the threat of electric, ice, and rock moves. But in the lore, the Delta Stream is something far more fundamental. It is a primordial atmospheric current, a shield woven from the planet's own breath. Rayquaza does not summon it so much as awaken it, and to awaken it, Rayquaza must first commune with the heavens. The Pokédex entries from Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire describe how Rayquaza flies through the ozone layer, feeding on the very particles of the upper atmosphere, and when it senses a threat from beyond, a meteor, a cosmic disturbance, it responds by mega-evolving. But the trigger is not a stone, it is a prayer. Think about that for a moment. A prayer, not a command, not a battle cry, but an act of supplication or readiness. In the lore of Hoenn, Rayquaza is the guardian of the sky, the one who quelled the battle between Groudon and Kyogre. Its mega evolution is described as a return to its original, full power, and to achieve that, it must synchronize, not with the trainer, but with the atmosphere. The meteorite serves as a focal point, a piece of the cosmic body that once threatened the planet. By consuming that meteorite, Rayquaza absorbs the energy of an extinct star, or a shattered world, and then it channels that energy through its own body. But only when the sky is right, only when the Delta Stream flows. This is the fundamental difference between what we call natural mega evolution and the artificial version. Every other mega form we have discussed in this series, Houndoom, Tyranitar, Gengar, even Mewtwo, relies on a manufactured stone. Those stones are fragments of the original megastones from Kalos, themselves possibly created by the burst of infinity energy from the ultimate weapon 3,000 years ago. They are artificial in the sense that they are human harvested, human distributed, human activated. The bond with the trainer is required, but the energy source is a relic of an ancient catastrophe. For Rayquaza, there is no relic. There is only the meteorite, and the meteorite is not a stone made by any hands. It is a natural object, a visitor from space, and Rayquaza's ability to use it is not learned. It is instinct. It is biological. The meteorite in Rayquaza's body plays a role unlike any held item. In the game lore, meteorite is a key item that can be given to Rayquaza to teach it Dragon Ascent, the move that then triggers Mega Evolution in battle. But the narrative suggests something deeper. In the Delta episode of Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, the player character travels to space, literally, to stop a meteor from colliding with the planet. Rayquaza Mega evolves without any trainer holding a keystone. It does so because it has absorbed the meteorite, and because it is responding to a threat from the cosmos. It is not a battle gimmick. It is a defense mechanism, a celestial immune response. And this is why Rayquaza is the only Pokémon that does not seem to suffer from the mega evolution process. Every other mega form we have catalogued carries a cost: pain, loss of control, bodily damage, psychological instability. But Rayquaza's Pokédex entries in Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire do not describe agony. They describe ascension. They say that when Rayquaza Mega evolves, it becomes able to live in the ozone layer permanently, its body adapting to the extreme conditions of near space. There is no mention of its bones cracking, its mind going berserk, or its body overheating. Instead, there is a sense of liberation. It is returning to a state it once held naturally, before some ancient cataclysm forced it to retreat to the lower atmosphere. Why would this be? Perhaps because Rayquaza's Mega Evolution is not an overclock, it is a restoration. Artificial Mega Evolution forces a Pokémon beyond its natural limits, pushing into territory the body was never meant to occupy. That is why it hurts. But Rayquaza's natural Mega Evolution is simply reconnecting with a power it already possessed. The meteorite does not add new energy. It reminds the body of a lost capacity. It is like a muscle that has atrophied and then is gently exercised, not a bone that is snapped into a new shape. The Delta Stream cradles it. The prayer centers it. The result is a transformation that feels like coming home, not like being torn apart. This distinction is crucial for understanding the dark secret of Mega Evolution as a whole. The suffering we have seen is not inherent to the process. It is a symptom of the artificial method. The stones we use are crude echoes of a natural phenomenon that Rayquaza alone still remembers. Perhaps the ancient trainers of Kalos, 3,000 years ago, witnessed Rayquaza's transformation and tried to replicate it, but they lacked the meteorite, the prayer, the Delta Stream. They had only the energy of the ultimate weapon. And so they forged stones that forced the bond between human and Pokémon into a violent shortcut, and that shortcut left scars. We are left with a question that echoes through every corner of Hoenn and Kalos. If Rayquaza's way is the natural way, what does that mean for all the others? Could the suffering be undone? Could a Pikachu learn to Mega Evolve by absorbing a meteorite under a certain sky? Probably not. But the existence of Rayquaza's method implies that Mega Evolution was never supposed to hurt. It was meant to be a reunion, a homecoming, a prayer answered by the sky. And somewhere, deep in the lore of Zygarde, the Order Pokémon, there may be a final answer about why balance demands that some powers remain dormant, and why the artificial awakening of those powers always comes with a price. In the next chapter, we will follow that thread into the heart of Kalos's forgotten ecosystem, and the Silent Watcher who ensures that no force, not even Mega Evolution, tips the scales too far. We ended the last chapter standing at the edge of the atmosphere, watching Mega Rayquaza descend from the ozone layer, its form wrapped in a draconic aurora, fueled not by a stone, but by pure will and the prayers of those below. That transformation was natural, ancient, a birthright written into the very stars. It did not require a megastone. It did not require a keystone. It required only permission from the sky itself. And that contrast between the natural and the artificial is where our next story begins. Because there is another guardian, one who dwells not in the heavens but beneath the earth, in the tangled roots of Kalos. And it has never been granted a Mega Evolution, not once. And the reason for that absence tells us more about the true nature of Mega Evolution than any Pokédex entry ever could. Zygarde is the Order Pokémon. Its title is not earned lightly. It is the enforcer of the ecosystem, the cellular watchdog that monitors the delicate balance of life, energy, and matter across the region. It exists in pieces, scattered as cells and cores across the land, observing everything from the tiniest blade of grass to the most explosive volcanic eruption. When a disturbance grows too large, when the natural order is threatened by something unnatural, Zygarde assembles. It gathers its 1,000 scattered cells, merges its cores, and rises into its full form, a serpentine colossus of green and black, its body lined with glowing chromatic circuits that pulse with the rhythm of the planet itself. It does not act out of malice. It acts out of necessity. It is the immune system of the world, and like any immune system, it does not judge. It simply identifies and eliminates. So why does Zygarde not have a Mega Evolution? The answer lies in the very energy that makes Mega Evolution possible. Mega stones are not natural in the way that an ordinary evolutionary stone is. They are fragments of ancient power, crystallized energy, released during the cataclysmic activation of the ultimate weapon 3,000 years ago. That weapon, built by King Azzy to resurrect his fallen Floette, drew upon the life force of countless Pokémon. It twisted death into a tool. It broke the boundary between life and energy in a way that the world had never intended. and the residual radiation from that event, the lingering imbalance, formed mega stones. They are scars on the planet. They are the ghost echoes of a war that should never have been fought. Zygarde's mission is to monitor the ecosystem. It senses every fluctuation of energy, every disruption in the flow of life, and megastones, with their concentrated unnatural energy, must register to Zygarde as anomalies. They are blips on the radar of the world. Each megastone is a small wound in the natural order, a point where the fabric of reality is stretched thin by the memory of an ancient atrocity. Zygarde does not destroy them, not directly. It cannot. They are too numerous, too scattered, too deeply embedded in the geological history of Kalos. But it watches them, it waits. And when a trainer activates a megastone, unleashing that burst of distorted energy into a living Pokémon, Zygarde takes note. It sees the sudden spike in chaos. It sees the body of a creature pushed beyond its natural limits, the mind flooded with power that was never meant to be wielded. There is a theory, whispered among lawkeepers and silent scholars, that Zygarde views Mega Evolution as a threat to the natural balance, not because the transformation itself is evil, but because it is a violation of the rules that govern life. Every creature has a ceiling. Every evolution has a natural boundary. Mega Evolution smashes that boundary with a hammer forged from death. It forces a Pokémon into a state it was never designed to inhabit, and the result is often pain, instability, and loss of control. Zygarde, as the Keeper of Order, sees this as a corruption. It sees the trainer and the Pokémon as participants in a ritual that borrows energy from a wound that never healed, and in doing so, they become agents of chaos. This is the hidden war, not a war fought with claws and beams of light, but a silent conflict of purpose. On one side stands Zygarde, representing order, stability, the slow and steady rhythm of nature. On the other side stands Mega Evolution, representing chaos, innovation, the desperate reach for power beyond the bounds of the body. It is a war of philosophies. Zygarde does not attack mega-evolved Pokémon on sight. It does not declare war on humanity, but its entire existence is a counterbalance to the reckless use of that power. When a mega evolution rages out of control, when the bond breaks and the Pokémon becomes a threat to the environment, Zygarde is there. It is the emergency brake that the world never knew it had. And yet, Zygarde itself could theoretically be given a megastone. Its cells are capable of merging into a powerful form. It has a complete core structure, but no megastone for Zygarde has ever been discovered. Not in any game, not in any official lore, not even in the most obscure side material. The absence is conspicuous. It is almost as if the universe itself prevents it. Perhaps a megastone for Zygarde would be a paradox, an object of order infused with chaotic energy. Perhaps the two forces would cancel each other out, or worse, create a feedback loop that destabilizes the very ecosystem Zygarde is meant to protect. Or perhaps Zygarde simply refuses. It can sense the unnatural nature of that energy, and it chooses not to participate. It is the only legendary of Kalos, alongside the life-giving Xerneas and the death-bringing Yveltal, that never received a megaform. And that choice, whether made by the developers or by the logic of the lore, reinforces the idea that Mega Evolution is not a universal good. It is a tool, and like any tool, it can be used for harm. Think of the ecosystem as a vast network of strings, each one vibrating at a specific frequency. Every living thing adds its own note to the symphony. Mega Evolution, with its sudden burst of energy, plays a note that is too loud, too sharp, too dissonant. Zygarde hears it. It feels the vibration through the earth, through the air, through the cells that make up its own body. It cannot ignore it, and so it waits, coiled beneath the surface, ready to restore balance when the music becomes unbearable. The conflict between order and chaos is not new to Pokémon. It is written into the very fabric of the universe, from the creation myth of Arceus to the duality of Groudon and Kyogre. But with Mega Evolution, that conflict becomes personal. It becomes a question asked to every trainer who activates a keystone. Do you understand what you are unleashing? Do you understand that the power you hold is borrowed from a tragedy. Zygarde does not answer that question. It only watches, and in its silent observation, it becomes the most honest reflection of what Mega Evolution truly is. A force that must be balanced, a fire that must be contained, a secret that must never be taken for granted. And as we turn our gaze from the Keeper of Order, we find ourselves drawn to something smaller, older, and far more vengeful. A doll abandoned, a curse that festered for decades, and a mega form that turns a child's toy into a harbinger of lingering rage. The next chapter unfolds in the shadow of a forgotten attic, where an empty button eye glows with the light of something that was never meant to wake. That chapter is called Mega Banette and the Curse Unleashed, and it asks a question that cuts deeper than any ecosystem ever could. What happens when the grudge itself is given the power to evolve? Zygarde exists to maintain balance, to keep the ecosystem from tipping into chaos, and it sees Mega Evolution as an unnatural energy source, a distortion of the natural order. So when a Pokémon like Banette undergoes that transformation, the result is not just a surge in power, but a rupture in the very fabric of what holds it together. Banette is already a Pokémon born from abandonment and rage, a doll left behind by a child, its spirit animated by a centuries-old grudge. It seeks its original owner, not for reconciliation, but for revenge. And Mega Evolution does not calm that hatred, it feeds it. When Banette holds its Bannettite, the Megastone resonates with the curse that already lives inside its stuffed body. The transformation is visible, and it is violent. The stitching along its limbs begins to glow, then tear, and then the zippers. Banette's body is covered in them. Zippers across its chest, along its arms, even across its mouth. In its normal form, those zippers are sealed, containing the bitterness inside, but in its mega form, they begin to unzip. Not all the way, not first, but just enough for something to leak out. And what leaks out is not light. It is a dark, writhing energy, cursed energy. The zippers open to reveal a terrifying amount of that force, as if the doll, a vessel that was never meant to hold that much malice. But here is the terrible irony. Banette's spirit is held together by that very curse. The hatred is what keeps the abandoned toy moving, thinking, existing. So when the zippers open and the cursed energy pours out, it is not just releasing power, it is releasing the animating force of the Pokémon itself. If the zippers are open too far, if the curse is allowed to spill out completely, Banette would cease to be. The spirit would dissipate, leaving behind nothing but an empty, discarded doll. The Mega Evolution becomes a balancing act between unleashing enough curse to overwhelm an opponent and holding back enough to keep the Pokémon alive. Every battle is a gamble with annihilation, and with that unleashed energy, Banette undergoes a transition from a vengeful doll to a literal manifestation of hatred. It no longer seeks revenge for a specific wrong. It becomes hatred itself, pure and indiscriminate. Its eyes burn with a pale blue light, and its body seems to twist and distort, the fabric of the doll warping around the force inside it. The curse is no longer just an emotion. It is a physical presence, a miasma that clings to everything around it. Trainers who have witnessed a Mega Banette in battle describe feeling cold, a weight in the air, as if the Pokémon's fury is pressing down on them from all sides. And the worst part, that Banette does not stop hating when the battle ends. Containing the curse once the battle is over becomes an immense challenge. Even after the Mega Stone stops glowing, even after Banette reverts to its normal form, the residual curse lingers. It seeps into the ground, into the air, into the memory of everyone who saw it. Some trainers report that their Banette becomes even more hostile after a Mega Evolution, as if the release of the curse has opened a door that can never be fully closed again. The doll may twitch uncontrollably, may whisper old names, may turn its head to stare at places that do not exist. A curse is not something that goes away, it is something that grows. And so we are left with a Pokémon that, in its quest for vengeance, is willing to risk its very existence. That is the price of Mega Evolution for Banette. Not just pain, not just loss of control, but the possibility of erasure. Every time the zippers open, Banette gambles with its own soul, and in that gamble, it becomes something that even other ghost types fear, a doll that hates so purely it might unmake itself. But not every mega evolution carries the risk of self-destruction. Some carry a different kind of danger, a danger not to the Pokémon itself, but to everything around it. And there is one mega form that is so closely tied to disaster that it has earned the name of an omen, a herald of death. That story will come next. The zippers on Banette's body had opened, releasing a torrent of cursed energy so concentrated that it threatened to unmake the spirit itself. That was the price of mega evolution for a Pokémon born from abandonment and spite. But tonight, we turn to a creature whose transformation is shaped not by stored resentment, but by a burden of foresight. A Pokémon that sees disaster before it arrives, long before it strikes, and whose desperate warnings have forever been misunderstood. That Pokémon is Absol, and its mega form is one of the most tragic contradictions in all of Kalosian lore. At first glance, Mega Absol appears almost angelic. Its fur grows longer, cascading into a dramatic pair of wing-like structures that sweep back from its head and shoulders. In the dim light of battle, they look like the feathered wings of a celestial being, a messenger descending from some higher plane. But this is an illusion. Those are not feathers. They are not even wings. They are bristling hairs, each one stiffened and thickened by the surge of mega evolution, standing on end in a permanent display of intimidation. The transformation of Absol's fur into these supposed wings is actually the body's attempt to make itself appear larger, more threatening, more terrifying. It is the same biological reflex that makes a cat's fur stand on end when it faces a predator, but locked into place and amplified by ancient energy. Absol does not grow wings, it grows spines of fear. It becomes a living warning written in its own skin, and yet is something profoundly sad in that image, because Absol, in its natural state, is a Pokémon that already carries the weight of a reputation it never asked for. For centuries, humans have associated it with calamity. When earthquakes strike, when tsunamis surge, when avalanches thunder down mountainsides, Absol is often seen descending from the peaks shortly before the disaster occurs. People assumed it was the cause, a dark omen that heralded destruction, but the truth is far more gentle. Absol senses the coming tragedy, picks up on shifts in the earth and sky, feels the build-up of pressure and imbalance, and it races down to warn the villagers below. It is not the harbinger. It is the messenger, trying desperately to save lives. But its appearance is so alien, so unsettling, that humans have always misinterpreted it. They drove it away, they feared it, they hunted it, and yet Absol never stopped trying. Now consider what Mega Evolution does to that same creature. The energy of the Mega Stone does not simply boost its stats. It deeply, fundamentally amplifies the very ability that makes Absol so uniquely sensitive. Its capacity to sense tragedy becomes overwhelming. Every ripple of distant sorrow, every tremor of future loss, every whisper of pain that has not yet happened floods into its mind with a clarity that borders on madness. The Mega Evolution amplifies Absol's ability to sense tragedy, causing it mental anguish that no other Pokémon can truly comprehend. It does not just know that something terrible is coming, it feels it. The entire weight of impending doom presses against its consciousness, and there is no off switch. In this heightened state, Absol is no longer just a concerned watcher, it becomes something else. The psychological burden of being a disaster Pokémon, already heavy, becomes unbearable when it is forced into a more violent role. Because Mega Evolution does not merely sharpen its senses, it also sharpens its instincts. The same power that makes it more sensitive also makes it more aggressive, more ready to fight, more dangerous. The Pokédex entries that describe Mega Absol are telling. They speak of it using those bristling hairs to slice through opponents with terrifying precision. They describe its fur as blades, its presence as an executioner's shadow. This is the creature that only ever wanted to warn humans, now transformed into a weapon of destruction. The irony is so sharp it cuts. Absol's entire existence is a cycle of misunderstood good intentions. It tries to help, it is punished, it persists. And then, when a trainer bonds with it deeply enough to unlock Mega Evolution, the universe hands it a consolation prize that is also a curse. It gains power, yes. It becomes formidable in battle. But that power comes at the cost of amplifying the very thing that makes it suffer. The tragedy sensing does not go away. It intensifies. The desire to warn does not disappear. It is still there, buried under layers of instinct and battle fury. But now Absol has teeth. It has wings made of hair, made of threat. It has become the very thing humans always feared it was, the angel of death. And yet, even in that form, you can still see the flicker of the original creature. If you watch closely, in the moments before it attacks, there is a pause. It looks toward the horizon, as if it is listening to something far away, the sounds of future grief. Then it turns back and it fights. It is not malicious. It is not evil. It is a being overwhelmed by the weight of knowing, and the only outlet it has left is violence. Mega Absol does not want to hurt, it wants to warn, but the stone does not grant the ability to be heard. It only grants the ability to destroy. The question that lingers after any encounter with Mega Absol is was this transformation truly a gift, or was it the final step in a long process of isolation? Absol was already the loneliest of Pokémon. It wandered the edges of human civilization, always watching from afar, always misunderstood. Mega Evolution did not bring it closer to people. It made it more dangerous, more frightening, more likely to be driven away again. The wings are not wings, they are walls, and behind those walls, Absol carries the knowledge of every tragedy it cannot stop. So when you see a Mega Absol in battle, remember what it represents. It is not a monster. It is a creature that was given more power to sense the world's pain, and then was asked to fight. That is the price of its evolution, and that price is paid in loneliness. As we move toward the final chapters of this story, we have to ask what happens when such transformations are no longer possible, when the stones themselves begin to fade, when the bond that once kindled this power starts to flicker. The next topic takes us to a mystery that haunts the very structure of Mega Evolution itself. It is the story of a disappearance, an absence that the world barely noticed, but that changed everything. That chapter is called The Disappearance of Mega Evolution, and it begins with a single question: what happened to all the Mega Stones? The transformation of Absol's fur into wings that are actually bristling hairs of intimidation. That was the last image we sat with. The psychological burden of being a disaster Pokémon, forced into a more violent role. It felt like a breaking point, didn't it? As if the system itself was telling us that Mega Evolution pushes a creature beyond what it was meant to endure. And that raises a question that has lingered in the background of every chapter we've explored. If Mega Evolution is so powerful, so transformative, why did it simply vanish from the later regions? You may have noticed that in Galar, the world of Pokémon Sword and Shield, Mega Evolution is almost entirely absent, and in Paldea, the region of Scarlet and Violet, it is completely gone. Not a single Mega Stone, not a single Keystone. The mechanic that once defined the pinnacle of trainer Pokémon bonds was quietly retired, replaced by Dynamax and Terastallization. But why? The official explanation is that each region has its own unique battle phenomenon, tied to its geography and history. But if you dig deeper, you start to see a pattern that suggests something far more unsettling. A deliberate suppression, a quiet phasing out of a technology that may have been too dangerous to keep using. Let's start with the energy itself. Mega Stones are not ordinary rocks. They are fragments of an ancient, primordial power that the games sometimes call infinity energy. This is the same energy that powered the ultimate weapon in Kalos 3,000 years ago. The weapon that brought death and resurrection on a catastrophic scale. Infinity energy is not a renewable resource in the way we might think. It is a finite, unstable force that was unleashed during the Kalos War, and then left to scatter across the land. Every time a Mega Stone is used, a tiny fraction of that energy is consumed. And every time a Pokémon Mega evolves, that energy is released into the atmosphere, into the very fabric of the world. Over time, the supply dwindles. Now consider this. In the game set after X and Y, a world where Mega Evolution is still possible, but only in specific locations. In Alola, it appears but is treated as an imported technique, not a native one. In Hoenn, it is rediscovered through ancient ruins and meteorites. But by the time we reach Galar, the infinity energy may have become too scarce or too volatile to safely harness. The Galar region instead developed Dynamax, a phenomenon that draws directly from the concentrated energy pools beneath the earth, what they call Galar particles. Those particles are abundant, localized, and can be controlled without the need for a personal bond stone. It is a more industrial, more regulated form of power. Then there is Paldea. Terrestrialization is yet another step away from the old ways. It does not require a unique stone for each species. It does not require a keystone. It simply requires a Terra Orb, which is charged at Pokémon centers, a renewable, man-made resource. The energy comes from the crystals found in the Great Crater of Paldea, an ancient, almost sacred source. Terrestrialization changes a Pokémon's type, not its entire biology, and it does not come with the same bodily horror we saw in Mega forms. It is safer, it is cleaner, and it is very deliberately replacing the old system. But there is a darker implication here. If infinity energy is being depleted, then every Mega Evolution we ever performed in the games was a drain on a finite cosmic resource. The Kalos region, where it all began, may have been the epicenter of a slow energy death. The very act of Mega Evolution might have been contributing to its own extinction, and we are left with the feeling that Mega Evolution was not just forgotten, it was retired. It was put aside because it was too costly, too risky, perhaps even too cruel. Think about the Pokémon that underwent Mega Evolution. We have seen how many of them experienced pain, loss of control, body horror. The trainers who used those stones were, in a way, agents of that suffering. And now the world has moved on. Galar chose a phenomenon that amplifies Scythe's power without altering the Pokémon's mind or body so drastically. Paldea chose a phenomenon that adds a temporary crystalline shell, a pure external boost. Both are safer for the Pokémon, both are more sustainable for the world, and yet there is a sense of loss. Mega Evolution was the ultimate symbol of trust and bond. It was the moment when a trainer and their partner transcended their limits together. But the lore is telling us that those limits existed for a reason. The bond was not enough to protect the Pokémon from the pain. The energy was not infinite, and so the world evolved beyond Mega Evolution, leaving it as a relic, a beautiful but dangerous memory. Now, as we move toward our next chapter, we must ask ourselves, what does this mean for the trainer? If the power carries a price that the universe itself cannot sustain, what burden falls on the one who holds the keystone? That question will lead us directly into the trainer's burden. The human cost of wielding a power that should perhaps never have been unleashed. We will explore that weight in the next part of our journey. But for now, let the silence settle. Let the whisper of forgotten stones fade into the background. The world has chosen its new paths, and Mega Evolution remains a ghost in the machine. A ghost that still aches to be remembered. We've spent the last chapter exploring why Mega Evolution seems to have faded from the later regions, how the once abundant infinity energy of Kalos may be running dry or being deliberately suppressed. But before we close the book on this transformation, we need to talk about the other half of the equation, the one holding the keystone, because for all the focus on the Pokémon suffering, the human partner carries a burden that is often overlooked, and that burden can be just as destructive. The bond required for Mega Evolution is not a one-way current. Synchronization is the word used in the ancient Kalos texts and in modern training manuals alike. But synchronization can become a two-way street of suffering. When a trainer activates the keystone, their mind and body are linked directly to the torrent of energy flowing into their Pokémon. For a few seconds, They experience a fraction of what the Pokémon feels. The heat, the pressure, the raw power surging through a body that was never designed to contain it. Most trainers describe an intense rush, a feeling of euphoria that borders on pain. But those who push the bond too far, who try to maintain the mega form beyond its natural limit, begin to crack. There are records, scattered, unofficial, whispered among the battle elites. Trainers who lost their grip on reality after repeated deep synchronizations. In some cases, the human would begin to develop phantom sensations, feeling wounds on their own body that matched those of their Pokémon. In others, the trainer's own physical health declined. Chronic headaches, tremors, and a gradual numbness in the hand that held the keystone. The most extreme stories speak of trainers who became so entangled in the energy that they could no longer distinguish their own emotions from those of their partner. They would laugh when their Pokémon felt joy, weep when it felt pain, and in one harrowing account from a remote Alolan clinic, a trainer reportedly screamed in agony at the exact moment his Mega Gengar was knocked unconscious, even though he was 40 feet away and untouched by any attack. This is the dark side of the promise that Mega Evolution is a symbol of trust. Trust implies consent, but the keystone does not pause to ask permission. The bond is forged and then it holds. For the trainer, the price of that power is not merely the risk of physical harm. It is the ethical responsibility of knowing that your partner is in pain for the sake of victory. Every time a mega stone glows and the familiar transformation music swells, the trainer makes a choice. They choose to subject their companion to a body and mind-altering ordeal, all in pursuit of a tactical advantage. Some trainers rationalize it by saying the Pokémon agrees, that the bond is mutual desire, but the Pokédex entries from Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon suggest otherwise. They describe Pokémon losing control, becoming berserk, and in the case of Mega Gengar, turning on everyone around them, trainer included. If the bond is a two-way street, what happens when the driver loses control? There is a reason why many ancient Kalos texts warned against the ritual of the keystone. The legends tell of a select order of knights who served as the first mega trainers. They were known as the Sky Touched, and they were said to have vanished after a single catastrophic battle. The official story is that they died in the war, but some historians believe they were consumed by their own power. The resources left behind describe a transformation in the human, as well as the Pokémon. Eyes that glowed an unnatural purple, skin that became warm to the touch, and a gradual erosion of personality. They became vessels for the energy, hollowed out by the very bond they thought they commanded. So when we ask why Mega Evolution disappeared from later regions, perhaps the answer is not just about depleted infinity energy. Perhaps it is about the quiet decision of trainers themselves to turn away from a tool that demands too much. The Galar region, with its focus on spectacle and sport, may have found the burden too heavy for public consumption. Paldea, with its emphasis on natural harmony, may have seen the artificial surge of Mega Evolution as a violation of the bond they hold sacred. Each region writes its own story about power, and the story of Mega Evolution became one that some trainers, some communities, chose not to tell, and yet the mystery remains. The stones still glow if you hold them near a strong enough bond. The key stones are still out there, set into old pendants, ancient crowns, or buried in the ruins of the Kalos War. The question is not whether the power exists, but whether we are willing to pay the price. That question will be the final verdict on Mega Evolution, a verdict we will examine in the next chapter as we bring together every thread we have followed, every haunting Pokédex entry, and every whisper of ancient tragedy, to decide once and for all whether this transformation was ever meant to be used. We began last time with the human half of the equation. The trainer whose body and mind are worn thin by the strain of maintaining the Mega Bond. We heard of trainers whose house trembled long after the stone went dark, whose eyes grew hollow from the constant effort to keep the link alive. And we asked ourselves, if the human side suffers so deeply, What must it be like for the Pokémon? That question leads us now to the final verdict. For years, the official story was simple. Mega Evolution is the ultimate expression of trust between a trainer and their partner. It is the moment when two souls synchronize so perfectly that the Pokémon transcends its own limits. The games showed us triumphant battles, glowing auras, and a feeling of unstoppable strength. And that is not a lie. That is real. The bond can be beautiful, a peak of friendship so profound that it unlocks a new form. But the same mechanic, examined under the cold light of the Pokédex, reveals a mirror image. The same transformation that feels like a gift can also be a curse. The same energy that elevates a Pokémon can also tear it apart. The truth is not one single fact. No hidden document, no forbidden technique. The darkest secret of Mega Evolution is the systemic exploitation of Pokémon life, woven into the very fabric of the mechanic itself. Consider the Kalos War 3,000 years ago. AZ built the ultimate weapon, a device that channeled the life force of countless Pokémon into a single blast of destruction. That war ended, but the energy left behind did not disappear. It soaked into the soil, the rocks, the ancient battlefields. The megastones we find today are fragments of that catastrophe. Every time a trainer activates a Mega Evolution, they are drawing on a power source born from tragedy. The price was paid long ago, and it continues to be paid in every battle. The lasting legacy of the Kalos War is not a monument or a museum. It is the hidden cost of every mega form that appears on the field. Every time a Houndoom's body begins to melt from the inside, every time a Tyranitar's back splits open under the strain, every time a Gengar turns its malice toward its own trainer, that is the echo of an ancient war crime. The Pokémon did not choose to be transformed into weapons. The energy that makes them stronger is the same energy that was once harvested from screaming victims. And yet we cannot simply call it evil, because within the same system, a trainer and a Pokémon can achieve something sacred, a bond so strong that the Pokémon willingly accepts the pain, trusts that the human will not let the power consume them. That is the duality. The same mechanic that allows a Gyarados to become a mindless rage-fueled beast can also allow a Lucario to fight with perfect clarity, guided by a trainer who shares its heart. The difference is not in the stone, it is in the relationship. The evidence is clear. Mega Evolution is not inherently good or bad. It is a mirror that reflects the intentions of the two beings who activate it. If the bond is pure, the transformation can be a moment of transcendent unity. If the bond is flawed, or if the trainer is careless, the same power becomes a nightmare. The Pokédex entries from Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon show us the worst-case scenarios, but they do not apply to every trainer. They are warnings, not inevitabilities. What matters then is the responsibility. The trainer who holds the keystone must understand that they are not just activating a power-up. They are asking their partner to endure something that may hurt. They are asking for a trust that goes beyond normal evolution. And if they are not worthy of that trust, the cost falls on the Pokémon. So the final verdict is this: Mega Evolution is a gift only when it is offered with love, and a curse when it is demanded without care. It is the peak of friendship and the peak of cruelty, depending entirely on who wields it and why. And every battle that uses a Megastone is a silent echo of the Kalos War, a reminder that power never comes without a price, and that price is always paid in the bodies and souls of Pokémon. Now, as we close this chapter, the shadows of lore grow longer. There are stories that do not fit neatly into any verdict, tales that linger in the space between sleep and waking. In the next chapter, we will explore what happens when the battlefield falls silent and the stones begin to whisper, when the lore itself becomes a dream and the dream becomes a warning. That chapter is called Sleep and the Shadows of Lore, and it will take us to the edge of what the games dare to remember. For now, rest. Let the verdict settle in the quiet of your mind, and know that in the world of Pokémon, nothing is ever truly free. We have weighed the evidence. We have seen the paradox. Mega Evolution is both a gift born of trust and a curse that burns through flesh and mind. And yet, for all the darkness the Pokédex entries whisper, for all the body horror of claws that melt and backs that rupture, there is something else. Something that lingers in the quiet moments after the battle ends. Something that cannot be measured by stats or described in a database. A bond that persists despite the pain. The mysteries of the Pokémon world are vast. They stretch across regions, across timelines, across the space between what we know and what we can only guess. Mega Evolution is one of those mysteries, a fragment of an ancient story that we will never fully read. The stones themselves are silent. They remember the Kalos War. Do they carry the echo of the ultimate weapon? The great machine that traded life for power? We do not know. The games never tell us plainly. They only give us battle forms and Pokédex text, leaving the rest to our quiet speculation. But perhaps that is the beauty of it. The world of Pokémon is not a puzzle to be solved. It is a landscape to be walked, a history to feel beneath the surface. And in that shadowed depth, we find a truth that is neither all comfort nor all horror. The truth is that power has always had a price. Every transformation, every evolution, every step along the road, from egg to champion, leaves a mark. Some marks are physical, some are etched into the spirit, and some are carried between two hearts, the trainer and the Pokémon, in a bond that chooses to endure. Consider the resilience of these creatures, even the most afflicted megaforms. The ones said to lose themselves to rage or agony still return to their normal state after the battle form when the keystone stops glowing. They do not stay broken. They do not stay berserk. The Pokémon that emerges after the battle is the same one that held your hand before the transformation. That is not a miracle worth pondering. It means the pain is not the end of the story. It means the bond can bear the weight of the overload. We have spoken of Mega Gengar, whose malice turns toward friend and foe alike. But Gengar is a shadow of memories, a creature born from loss. Perhaps its mega form is not corruption, but amplification of an ancient grief. And yet in the anime, even Gengar can be a loyal partner. The bond does not erase the darkness. It holds it. It walks beside it. That is the quietude of strange. That is a kind of love. Think of the stones. They are small, ordinary-looking objects, often found in caves or on dusty shelves, but they hum with a power we barely understand. Some say they are fragments of a meteor, cosmic debris that fell to Earth 3,000 years ago when the ultimate weapon was fired. Others say they are evolution stones that soaked in the lingering radiation of Xerneas and Yveltal life and death entwined. The truth is hidden, perhaps lost. But in that loss, there is room for wonder. The stones do not need to be understood to be held. The bond does not need to be explained to be real. This is our final reflection on the shadows of lore, not to dismiss the horror, but to set it beside the grace. Mega Evolution is not a simple story. It is a tale of power that wounds and of a resilience that heals imperfectly. It is a tale of trainers who choose to carry that weight alongside their partners. Not because they ignore the cost, but because they believe the partnership is worth it. And that resilience is not just a Pokémon trait, it echoes in the trainer. As we have seen, the human side of Mega Evolution can strain the mind and body, but again, the bond endures. It is a two-way bridge built from trust, and trust once forged does not break easily. Even in the darkest readings of the Pokédex, we do not find stories of Pokémon that resent their trainers for the pain. We find stories of instinct and transformation, not betrayal. The price is paid, but it is paid together. So as we let this chapter close, let the quiet lore of the stones and the stars settle around you. The stars have watched Kalos rise and fall. The stones have witnessed the touch of ancient energy, and the bond between a person and a Pokémon is older than either. It is the first story told in the forest, the first spark of light in a cave, the first shared breath after a victory. Mega Evolution is a power with a price, but it is also a power with a heart. And in the end, that heart beats still, long after the battle ends, long after the glow fades. The shadows of lore are deep, but they are not empty. They are full of the footprints of those who walk together, And so we rest here, at the edge of what we know and sleep dreams. The stones are quiet. The quiet bond remains. The mystery continues. Good night, traveler. May your dreams be filled with the warmth of a partnership that asks no explanation and gives more than it takes. What did you think of this journey? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this changed your perspective or taught you something new, consider subscribing for more mind-expanding content. And if you know someone who would find this as fascinating as you did, share it with them. These are the kind of conversations that matter.